Chapter 699. Why is Chuluwa here? This question quickly flashed through Jiang Yuqing's mind. He only remembered that after he was dragged down, the entrance above was completely sealed. He didn't know what happened to the others. Could it be that he was the only one who encountered this? If not, why would Chuluwa be standing here perfectly fine? She didn't seem to have any injuries at all, and her entire body was clean. However, looking at Chuluwa's smiling face, Jiang Yuqing couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in his heart. He looked around. Other than Chuluwa, there seemed to be a few other people in the distance, and a huge colorful barrier. Sensing the terrifying fluctuations coming from the barrier, Jiang Yuqing suddenly realized something and widened his eyes. That's a 9th grade magical beast. There was no other explanation for such a commotion other than a 9th grade magical beast. Chuluwa didn't avoid it and nodded frankly. Eldest young Master Jiang has good eyesight. Jiang Yuqing immediately wanted to go over, but he suddenly remembered that half of his body was still buried below, and he couldn't break free. Chuluwa smiled and asked knowingly, "Eldest young Master Jiang, what's wrong with you?" Jiang Yuqing's face was red and white. When he thought of his current sorry state, his face burned with pain. He couldn't be seen by anyone, but it had to be Chuluwa moreover. She looked fine, which made him even more unbearable to look at. Jiang Yuqing had always cared about his face. In the face of such a situation, he only felt embarrassed and wished he hadn't come out from below. He waved the saber in his hand and slashed at the tree roots that were tightly wrapped around him, trying to break free. Only then did Chuluwa see that many tree roots had penetrated his body, leaving scars. As expected, this one Yeshan had indeed swallowed Jiang Yuqing's blood. With his current physical condition, how could he withstand such torture? Looking at that ghastly pale face, Chuluwa admired his rare miserable appearance for a while, and her mood improved a lot. What was all this? It was not even a tenth of the pain she had experienced. If he couldn't make Jiang Yuqing repay him in every possible way, how could he dispel the hatred in his heart? As if sensing Chuluwa's strange gaze, Jiang Yuqing finally glanced at her again with a slight frown. Before he could speak, Chuluwa spoke first. "Eldest young Master Jiang, you seem to be seriously injured. Do you need my help?" Jiang Yuqing swallowed the words in his throat. For some reason, he felt that Chuluwa's expression was somewhat subtle. It looked like he really wanted to help. However, his black jade-like eyes were flickering with light, making it hard for others to fathom his intentions. Jiang Yuqing was silent for a moment, then looked at the cut on the tree root and asked, "You did that?" Chuluwa gently nodded. "I heard a sound here, so I came over to take a look. I just happened to see this tree root moving. I felt that this thing was really strange, so I tried to stab it with a knife. I didn't expect to see eldest young Master Jiang here." Her tone was very sincere. Jiang Yuqing believed her a little. It wasn't easy for him to find a way out. At this time, the force in his body was almost exhausted. He had to get out of here as soon as possible and find a place to recuperate. However, this tree root was really difficult to deal with. As he tried to break free, he asked, "Why are you here? Other than you, who are those people? Where are the others?" The corners of Chuluwa's mouth curled up imperceptibly. Jiang Yuqing was still worried about her and wanted to ask for an explanation. "Eldest young Master Jiang, it's a long story. Let's wait for you to come out before we talk about it in detail. Why don't I help you? What do you think?" Jiang Yuqing saw that it was really difficult to rely on himself, so he could only nod. Chuluwa took a step forward. "Just cut off these tree roots," Jiang Yuqing said. Chuluwa agreed easily and raised the dagger in her hand. As the tree roots moved, Jiang Yuqing's body was also dragged out more. Almost only a pair of legs were left, still buried inside. Chuluwa glanced out of the corner of her eye. Boom! The third Tianlei fell. A series of loud noises reverberated throughout the entire forest. Layers of dark clouds covered the sky and the sun, and the forest was dark. Chuluwa deliberately used her body to block Jiang Yuqing. In addition, there were thick tree roots and other objects here, which covered Jiang Yuqing even more. Even Chang Wanzhou, who had been looking over, couldn't see what was happening here. Accompanied by the terrifying aftermath, A dazzling light flickered endlessly. It reflected on Jiang Yuqing's face, half bright and half dark. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand. There was only a step between the two of them at this moment. As long as she waved her hand, the dagger could easily slit Jiang Yuqing's throat. Surging hatred and killing intent surged from the bottom of her heart. A cold light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes. The blade turned slightly, and the cold light was biting cold. Jiang Yuqing was dealing with a tree root wrapped around his chest, and didn't notice this side. All of the grudges, hatred, it could be ended in an instant. Chu Luiyue moved her wrist. Crash! Just as Chu Luiyue was about to move, a tree not far away suddenly uprooted. It split from the middle. Broken wood splattered everywhere. A figure rushed out. Chu Luiyue quickly glanced at it, and her pupils constricted. It was Mu Qinghe. At the same time, Jiang Yuqing was also attracted by the movement and looked over. After seeing the person clearly, he immediately shouted, "Vice Admiral Mu." Mu Qinghe had just broken free from the restraints and rushed out from below. Hearing this, she immediately looked up. The person half buried in the ground was Jiang Yuqing, and the woman beside him. He narrowed his eyes. Why was it Chu Luiyue? Sensing Mu Qinghe's gaze, Chu Luiyue's expression didn't change. She flipped her palm and stabbed out with the dagger. Thud! A section of the tree root was immediately cut off by Chu Luiyue. Red liquid splattered. At the same time, a cold wind came from behind. It was the other root of the tree that suddenly rose up. It was aimed at Chu Luiyue's back. Her plan was suddenly interrupted. At this time, Chu Luiyue was in a bad mood. Sensing this movement, her face turned cold. She quickly turned around and raised her hand. A ball of red flame transformed into a long whip and flew out instantly. Smack! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. The flame whip immediately entangled with the tree root. However, the strength of the tree root couldn't be underestimated. With a fierce struggle, it directly pulled Chu Luiyue and caused her to stagger. Chu Luiyue simply rolled on the ground, and the force in her body surged out violently. Boom! The flame burned even more fiercely. The entire tree root was instantly surrounded by the red flame. The flame spread rapidly, and soon enveloped the entire tree. Chu Luiyue coldly spat out a word. Explode! Bang! The sturdy one Yes Han immediately exploded. At this time, Mu Qinghe had already rushed over. With her help, Jiang Yuqing finally broke free. Eldest young master, are you okay? Mu Qinghe frowned and asked. Jiang Yuqing didn't answer her. He only stared blankly at Chu Luiyue in front of him. Just now, she really saved him. Boom! Chu Luiyue looked at the burning flame in front of her, and the hand holding the dagger slowly tightened. What a pity! Digression. There was some delay in the morning. The remaining chapters will be updated at 8 p.m. Updated. Thank you for your understanding. Moi mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 700. Chu Luiyue was unhappy, but when she turned around, the expression on her face had returned to normal. Vice Admiral Mu. She greeted Mu Qinghe very politely. It was a pity that she couldn't get rid of Jiang Yuqing directly this time. But thinking about it carefully, she still felt a little reluctant to kill him like this. Wouldn't it be too easy to die with a knife? There's still a long way to go. It's better to let young Master Jiang enjoy his life. As Chu Luiyue thought about it, she openly sized up Jiang Yuqing from head to toe, as if she was concerned and sympathetic. Young Master Jiang, I don't think your current condition is very good. Why don't you recuperate as soon as possible? Jiang Yuqing was originally staring at Chu Luiyue's back in a daze, but when she spoke, he suddenly came back to his senses. Sensing that Chu Luiyue's gaze was sweeping back and forth over his body, Jiang Yuqing felt inexplicably embarrassed in his heart. His battered and exhausted appearance was completely seen by her. He coughed to cover up his embarrassment. I have medicine. As he spoke, he took out a pill and swallowed it. Mu Qinghe watched from the side. She felt that there was something wrong with Jiang Yuqing, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It was probably because of what he had just experienced. Anyone who had walked around the line between life and death would probably feel some lingering fear. Jiang Yuqing looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. Just now. Thank you. For a moment, He almost thought that Chu Luiyue wanted to kill him. But everything that happened later proved that this was just a misunderstanding. He had always been a suspicious person and wouldn't easily trust anyone, especially when it was a matter of life and death. Chu Luiyue's unreserved help was greatly beyond his expectations. "Young Master Jiang, you're too polite." Chu Luiyue smiled faintly, as if she didn't take this matter to heart. Jiang Yuqing was silent for a while before he spoke again. "I owe you one this time." Mu Qinghe suddenly glanced at him, a rare look of surprise flashing through her eyes, as if she hadn't expected him to say this. This person had always been vicious and merciless, cold-hearted and heartless. In the past few years, who knew how many people had sacrificed their lives for him? But he had never once spared them a single glance. Why did he take the initiative to say that he owed Chu Luiyue a favor? Could it be that he intended to befriend Chu Luiyue? After all, from what had happened during this period of time, Chu Luiyue's talent and strength were extraordinary. He was indeed worth befriending. On the surface, Chu Luiyue appeared to be very modest. He repeatedly said that he did not dare. But in fact, there was not the slightest ripple in his heart. She had seen Jiang Yuqing's dog-like behavior too many times. In this world, there was probably no one who knew better than her what kind of shocking level this man could bring to two-faced people. When he handed her tea, he always had a gentle and elegant smile on his face. But in the end, she found out that under the mask of that smile, it was all poison. Chu Luiyue did not take this matter to heart. She treated Jiang Yuqing's somewhat complicated gaze as a joke. In fact, she was more interested in Mu Qinghe. "Vice Admiral Mu, why did you suddenly come out from that side just now?" Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless as usual. "We encountered an accident earlier, and everyone fell into a ravine. It took me a lot of effort to escape." As he spoke, he looked at Chu Luiyue and frowned. "Why did you, Luyu?" Before Mu Qinghe could finish, he was interrupted by Mu Hongyu's voice. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw that Chang Wanzhou and the rest were actually here. Chang Wanzhou was at the front and was the fastest. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran were slightly behind, but they also looked worried. Although Lei Laosi was still guarding there, he kept looking over here. After all, the commotion just now was not small. Chu Luiyue smiled and shook her head. "I'm fine." Mu Hongyu and the rest were relieved when they saw that she was indeed not injured. She turned and looked at Jiang Yuqing and Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe was fine, but Jiang Yuqing's body was covered in black mud. He was covered in wounds and blood, and his face was pale. He looked very disheveled. Mu Hongyu frowned and covered her nose. "What's that smell?" It was as if something was rotting, and it was mixed with a thick bloody smell that made one feel nauseous. Jiang Yuqing's face turned from white to green, and the veins on his forehead were still throbbing. Yi Ranran secretly pulled Mu Hongyu and gave her a look. "Isn't this smell coming from Jiang Yuqing's body? Wouldn't it be embarrassing for Jiang Yuqing if she said that?" Mu Hongyu then realized it and shut her mouth. She glanced at Chu Luiyue. "I seem to have offended someone?" However, Chu Luiyue's expression was normal, and when he looked back at her, he had a relieved expression. Also, there seemed to be a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Mu Hongyu was a little confused. This, Luyu doesn't seem to mind this very much. Why do I feel like I'm being affirmed?" Mu Hongyu thought for a while and couldn't figure it out, so she threw this matter to the back of her mind. "I'll listen to Luyu. If Luyu says it's fine, then it's definitely fine." Chu Luiyue stared at Jiang Yuqing's face a few more times. Uffed. In the entire Tianling dynasty, who would dare to ridicule Jiang Yuqing in front of him? Only a simple-minded person like Mu Hongyu would do such a thing. Chu Luiyue praised in his heart. "Well done. Jiang Yuqing won't be able to put on airs for a long time in the future." Mu Qinghe looked at them and frowned even more. "Why are you all here? You weren't dragged down?" Chu Luiyue nodded honestly. "During the riot, my magical beast suddenly ran away, so I chased after it. The rest of them followed me. Later, when we found the magical beast and wanted to go back, we realized that you guys were no longer here. We decided to stay here and wait for an opportunity to meet up with the main group." Chu Luiyue casually brushed the matter aside and asked, "Why? Weren't you all together at the beginning? Why did you all split up?" Mu Qinghe, Sheng Guanwan, Jiang Yuqing, and the others had always been together. Even they had split up, let alone the others. Mu Qinghe's face was a little cold. The situation happened too suddenly. If he didn't have a certain understanding of the mystic forest, and knew how to deal with Wan Yeshan, he would probably still be trapped in that swamp. I see. I wonder how the others are now. Chu Luiyue looked around, as if he wanted to see if anyone would come out again. Mu Qinghe and Jiang Yuqing didn't say anything. How could they answer this? Based on the situation of the swamp below, it would be difficult to escape. They had just entered the mystic forest, and they had encountered such a thing. It was obvious that more than 1,000 people had died. Mu Qinghe rarely suffered such a big loss, so naturally, she wasn't in a good mood. Boom! Another bolt of heavenly lightning struck. Jiang Yuqing finally came back to his senses, and looked up with a serious expression. Is that a 9th grade magical beast that is about to break through? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 701. Jiang Yuqing's tone was filled with bewilderment, but his eyes were filled with unconcealable surprise. It was obvious that he didn't expect that he would end up here, after walking on the edge of life and death. He bumped into the 9th grade fiend that was going through Tianlei. Previously he had been thinking about it, but now that he saw it as soon as he raised his eyes, how could he not be happy? Chu Luiyue nodded calmly. They were already here, and Tianlei kept falling. Even a fool could tell what the situation was now. Jiang Yuqing got up and wanted to walk forward. Chu Luiyue raised his brows slightly. Lei Laosi was guarding over there, and it would be a miracle if Jiang Yuqing could go over safely. With his current ability, he probably couldn't even last 10 moves under Lei Laosi's hands. It was Mu Qinghe who stopped him. Eldest young master, it's very dangerous over there. Let's wait and see first. Jiang Yuqing was a little displeased. Chu Luiyue and the rest came from there just now. But they couldn't go over now? It was already embarrassing enough. If they continued to hide here, wouldn't they seem even more cowardly? Jiang Yuqing didn't listen, and continued walking forward. However, he just took 2 steps when a burning pain suddenly came from his lower abdomen. Jiang Yuqing's face turned pale instantly, and he staggered and almost fell to the ground. Mu Qinghe immediately went forward to support him and frowned. Eldest young master, what's wrong? Due to the intense pain, Jiang Yuqing's forehead was filled with sweat, and his lips were trembling slightly. He couldn't say a word. He had felt this a few times before, but it was never as painful as this time. It was as if a flame directly penetrated his lower abdomen and entered his dantian. It was also the first time Mu Qinghe saw Jiang Yuqing like this, and she thought that he was injured by Wan Yeshan's roots just now. Eldest young master, you should rest for a while first. Your body is more important. Even if Jiang Yuqing wanted to refuse, he couldn't say anything now. Chu Luiyue glanced at him indifferently. Jiang Yuqing barely managed to sit cross-legged when he felt the pain quickly disappear. However, the bone-piercing pain lingered in his mind for a long time. A trace of worry and fear finally appeared in Jiang Yuqing's heart. This time, it might be a coincidence. What about twice? What about the 3rd time? There was definitely something wrong with his body, but no matter how he thought about it, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. Back then, that Xiamu had only used a brush to leave a bloody hole in his body. In fact, it wasn't a serious injury. As long as he recuperated well, he would recover very quickly. However, even after some time had passed, the wound still did not heal. And from time to time, there would be this strange burning pain. However, Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to expose this in front of outsiders. He could only nod briefly and say nothing more. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a little itchy on her neck. She turned her head and saw Dumpling pulling her hair and wagging its tail, as if it wanted to go back. She didn't know what was over there that made it yearn for it so much. Chu Luiyue patted its head comfortingly and looked at Jiang Yuqing. Eldest young master Jiang, why don't you rest here first? We'll go and see how that 9th grade demonic beast is doing. The 3rd princess came here this time for the divine beast's blood. Wouldn't it be a pity to miss it? Jiang Yuqing wanted to go by himself. However, he really couldn't do anything in his current state. He could only nod and look at Mu Qinghe. You should go with them. Mu Qinghe was stronger, so she would definitely be more confident if she went. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched, but she didn't say anything. Eldest young master's body. Mu Qinghe seemed to be a little hesitant. Just go ahead. I know how my body is. Jiang Yuqing's expression became a little more solemn. Mu Qinghe didn't hesitate anymore and immediately agreed. Yes. Chu Liyue's lips curled up. With Vice Admiral Mu around, we'll be more confident. Mu Qinghe's expression was cold as she followed them forward. Hearing that Chu Liyue and the rest were back, Lei Laosi turned around to take a look. With this glance, she saw Mu Qinghe, who was following behind the few of them. Murderous intent surged out from Lei Laosi's eyes instantly. I didn't see her earlier, but I didn't expect her to be here. He gripped the hammer in his hand tightly, and the force around him surged. Mu Qinghe seemed to have noticed something, and suddenly raised his head to take a look. The two of them looked at each other. Mu Qinghe immediately felt the other party's intense murderous intent. It was as though he was going to attack the next moment. He furrowed his brows slightly. Who is this person? Why does he seem to have a deep hatred for me? Before Mu Qinghe could think too much, a figure suddenly walked in front of her and blocked her line of sight. It was Chu Liyue. Mu Qinghe's gaze landed on Chu Liyue. However, Chu Liyue seemed to have no intention of doing so as he shouted at the man in front of him. Big brother Lei. Hearing this, Lei Laosi suddenly returned to his senses, and the murderous aura in his eyes was restrained. However, his expression still looked like he wasn't someone to be trifled with. Chu Liyue walked to him and smiled. Big brother Lei, don't worry. This is Vice Admiral Mu that I mentioned to you just now. He came with us, and he has no ill intentions. Lei Laosi looked at Chu Liyue suspiciously. Her words seem like she's trying to hide something. Chu Liyue then looked at Mu Qinghe and explained, Vice Admiral Mu Qinghe, Vice Admiral Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is Lei Laosi, big brother Lei. He's in charge of protecting this 9th grade fiend. Lei Laosi instantly understood Chu Liyue's plan. Is she trying to help me hide my identity? It's true that I can't expose myself in front of Mu Qinghe now. But, how did Chu Liyue see through it? Many doubts arose in Lei Laosi's heart. He turned his gaze and fixed it in a certain direction before swiftly retracting it. He took a deep breath and kept the resentment in his heart. Then, he glanced coldly at Mu Qinghe and scoffed. Another one who wants to join in the fun? I don't care if you're a lieutenant general or not. All of you stand 10 steps away and are not allowed to come close. Mu Qinghe looked at his ferocious appearance and then at the gigantic colorful barrier behind him as she narrowed her eyes. Why would a human be in charge of guarding a 9th grade fiend? However, this Lei Laosi does seem to have some ability, and he's obviously moving more freely than us in this area filled with terrifying suppression. It's obvious that he's been here for a long time, and he might really be related to that 9th grade fiend. Chu Liyue smiled and said, Don't worry, we're just here to watch. We won't do anything. Vice Admiral Mu, don't you think so? Mu Qinghe paused for a moment and nodded. Lei Laosi scoffed. Now is the crucial moment, and there mustn't be any mistakes. Mu Qinghe, it's not too late to deal with her in the future. Just as he was about to turn around, his gaze suddenly focused on a figure far away. Who is that person? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 702. Chu Liyue thought that he saw Jiang Yuqing and was about to speak when she suddenly heard a panting voice from behind. Vice Admiral Mu? Recognizing the identity of the owner of this voice, Chu Liyue knitted her brows slightly, and a hint of annoyance appeared in the corners of her eyes. She lazily turned around to take a look. It was indeed Elder Qiushi. At this moment he looked rather disheveled. Half of his body was stained with black mud, and his face was even scratched by something. Fresh blood flowed down, and he looked a little terrifying. He was only slightly better than Jiang Yuqing. Mu Qinghe walked forward. Elder Qiushi, why are you here? I didn't seem to hear anything just now. Elder Qiushi hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed his arm as he asked anxiously. What's the matter? He hurriedly asked. Vice Admiral Mu, have you seen the 3rd princess? Elder Qiushi did not deliberately lower his voice when he said this. Chu Liyue's eyelashes trembled slightly, Murderous intent flashed past Lei Laoxi's eyes. The others also quietened down. Mu Qinghe knitted her brows and shook her head. No. Elder Qiushi was extremely anxious. What should we do? What should we do? Elder Qiushi, don't be anxious. What exactly happened? Weren't you always with Her Highness previously? Elder Qiushi and Elder Duanmuchun were different from him. The two of them were here specifically to protect Shengguanwan. Even if Mu Qinghe and Jiang Yuqing weren't with Shengguanwan, these two elders should be by her side and never leave her side. Elder Qiushi took a deep breath, but his face was still filled with anxiety and nervousness. At the start, we did indeed fall into that gully with the third princess. I'm sure you know what happened down there, Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe nodded. Actually, there were quite a number of people who fell down at the same time, including some of the Black Cavalry and a few sect disciples. However, the swamp below was extremely dangerous. Many people fell into it and never came out again. Originally, we weren't too far away from His Highness. We planned to bring His Highness away. But then for some reason, the swamp suddenly started to move. Elder Qiushi swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. When he recalled the scene back then, there was still a sense of horror in his heart. In the end, we were all separated. His Highness is also nowhere to be found. Even he had a hard time seizing the chance to escape. He had only come here because he had sensed the commotion. She immediately spotted Mu Qinghe. Because Elder Qiushi came directly from another direction, he didn't see Jiang Yuqing sitting on the other side in the distance. Vice Admiral Mu, you said His Highness. His Highness. Elder Qiushi's aged face was filled with worry. That place was extremely dangerous. He didn't know how long Shengguanwan could last. Mu Qinghe said in a deep voice. Elder Qiushi, don't worry. Since so many people are here, perhaps some of them are still with His Highness. Moreover, His Highness is blessed by the heavens. Nothing will happen to him. That's right. Her Highness the third princess is extremely powerful. Even if she really encounters any trouble, she will definitely be able to deal with it easily, right? A lazy and clear voice suddenly interrupted from the side. Elder Qiushi looked over in a daze. Only then did he clearly see that the person who spoke was actually Chu Luiyue. Why are you here? Elder Qiushi felt extremely annoyed when he saw this face, and the expression on his face became much colder. Chu Luiyue felt that it was ridiculous. She seemed to be the first to come to this place, right? Why were these people asking her this question now? Could it be that she, Chu Luiyue, was not qualified to appear here? Chu Luiyue said with a faint smile. Elder Qiushi, we have been here since the beginning. You were thinking about the third princess wholeheartedly, so it's normal that you didn't see us. However, your expression, could it be that you feel that what I said just now was wrong? Elder Qiushi's face instantly flushed red. He knew a little about Shengguanwan's condition. Hence, when he heard Chu Luiyue's words just now, he subconsciously felt that it was sarcastic. But thinking about it now, what would a Chu Luiyue know? If he admitted it, wouldn't it be equivalent to saying that something would definitely happen to Shengguanwan? He waved his sleeves fiercely. The third princess will naturally be safe and sound. Do I need you to say that? Chu Luiyue smiled with curved eyes as though she didn't mind Elder Qiushi's bad attitude at all. Lei Laoxi clenched the hammer in his hand tightly and suppressed the emotions in his heart with much difficulty as he turned to look at the colorful barrier. Everyone is really here. If it weren't for the fact that he had to guard this place, and boss kept reminding him not to mess around, even if he had to search the entire mystic forest, he would have found Shengguanwan and the rest, and smashed their heads open with a hammer. Chu Luiyue glanced at him lightly. Even if she only saw his back view, she could still feel that suppressed anger. It's really tough for him to hold it in. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. If there was a chance, she really wanted to have a good chat with Lei Laoxi. Mu Qinghe persuaded in a low voice. Elder Qiushi, since you're here, the third princess should be nearby too. Why don't we use this place as the center and search the surroundings? You might be able to find her. Elder Qiushi's face was filled with worry. Sigh. That's the only way. Right, what's that? As he spoke, he raised his finger and pointed at the colorful barrier with a bewildered expression. Just now, he only wanted to find Shengguanwan. and didn't pay attention to anything else. Now that he paid a little more attention, he realized that there seemed to be something wrong with this place. The suppression contained in that colorful barrier was incomparably shocking. The most important thing was that it seemed to have attracted Tianlei. Isn't this? This is the 9th grade fiend that we were looking for previously, Mu Qinghe said softly. Although Elder Qiushi had already expected it, he was still shocked when he heard it personally. He couldn't help but take 2 steps forward as he stared intently ahead. This is real. He had never seen a legendary fiend before. If this 9th grade fiend could successfully break through, then… Elder Qiushi, aren't you in a hurry to find the 3rd princess? Chu Luyue asked lazily. Elder Qiushi's expression froze. I think I should wait here to get the blood of the legendary fiend. After all, the 3rd princess is here for this. If I miss it, the 3rd princess will definitely blame me. Zap! A black arrow pierced through the air. It went straight for Elder Qiushi's glabella. At the same time, his furious voice was like a clap of thunder, exploding in their ears. Old thing, you're dreaming. Digression. There's one more update. Around 9 p.m., mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 703. Elder Qiushi was shocked and immediately blocked it with his hand. Mu Qinghe raised her arm, raised the scabbard and blocked that black arrow. Ding! A crisp sound of collision was heard. Mu Qinghe's expression changed slightly. The power contained in this arrow was extremely strong, and it directly numbed half of his arm. However, he didn't block that arrow completely, and only caused it to deviate slightly from its original direction. Elder Qiushi was furious, but he didn't have time to execute any other moves, and could only grab it with his bare hands. He did grab the arrow, but his palm seemed to be on fire. Elder Qiushi's eyelids twitched harshly, and he couldn't wait to let go of his hand immediately. However, how could he do such a thing with so many people watching? Thus, he could only forcefully endure it and silently swallow this pain. However, the power on that arrow was too strong. After it landed in his hand, it actually didn't stop, and was still spinning crazily instead. Poof! That arrow actually shot out from Elder Qiushi's hand. As the direction was slightly deviated previously, the arrow still flew over his head and brushed past his scalp tightly. Elder Qiushi felt that his scalp was almost lifted. However, what made him suffer the most right now wasn't the pain in his scalp, but his hand stretched out slightly, and he quickly lowered his head to take a look. His palm was already badly mutilated. Elder Qiushi's heart thumped harshly. If that arrow really passed through my glabella, I'm afraid I'll lose my life. After the shock, there was lingering fear. After the lingering fear, there was anger. Elder Qiushi only felt that his heart and lungs were filled with extreme resentment, which almost made him crazy. He raised his head furiously and glared at Lei Laosi. You! What about me? Lei Laosi raised his hand, and that arrow turned around and flew back into his hand. He took a look and wiped the arrow on his coarse clothes in disdain, before putting it back into the quiver. It was as though it was stained with something dirty. I'm not going to tell you that with me, Lei Laosi, around today, no one can enter this barrier. As Lei Laosi spoke, he glared at Elder Qiushi with a warning gaze. The corners of his eyes were red, and his face was fierce. It was obvious that he was really angry. No one doubted that if anyone dared to step forward, he would immediately pierce through their heart. There was a moment of silence. Even Elder Qiushi, who had suffered a great loss, took a while to react. He opened his mouth, but did not know how to refute. This Lei Laosi's strength is definitely above all of us. Elder Qiushi had a proud personality and liked to compete for everything. However, when his life was in danger, he knew to lower his head and admit defeat. Who asked him to be slightly inferior? Elder Qiushi tried his best to make his expression look natural, but his stiff face still betrayed him, showing his nervousness and fear. Who are you? How could he be so arrogant? Could it be that this 9th-ranked magical beast is your magical beast? Lei Laosi looked at him, as though he was looking at a dead man. Looks like you haven't suffered enough just now. As he spoke, he was about to knock another arrow. Elder Qiushi's heart trembled, and he actually took half a step back unconsciously. Chu Luyue glanced at it, and her lips curled up into a smile. He didn't laugh out loud. However, who couldn't tell the meaning of this mockery? Elder Chiyoshi instantly felt extremely embarrassed. His old face had been completely lost here. I'd better go and find the third princess first. Then he hurriedly turned around and left. After walking for a distance, Elder Chiyoshi's expression still didn't recover. This was the first time he had made a fool of himself. Mu Qinghe looked at Lei Laosi with a deep gaze. Lei Laosi clearly had the intention to kill when he attacked just now. Who exactly is he? Did he attack so viciously because he felt offended or because of other reasons? Boom! Another bolt of heavenly lightning struck. Chu Liyue turned around and looked intently. This was already the 5th Tianlei. Half of the 9th Tianlei was already gone. The transparent part of the barrier also became wider and wider, almost reaching half of the entire height. However, the strange thing was that no one could see the magical beast's appearance until now. Chu Liyue looked carefully again, and suddenly her gaze focused. What is that? Hearing her voice, the few of them followed her line of sight. A piece of dried brown tree bark? That seems to be a tree. Yi Ranran was the first to speak with sharp eyes. Chu Liyue actually saw it too. At the center of the barrier, there indeed seemed to be a huge and thick one. Yes-han. At first, they could only see piled up fallen leaves and extended tree roots. But now, they could see a section of the tree trunk. This tree was taller and more majestic than any tree they had seen before. Chu Liyue took a closer look and realized that even if 5 people hugged the tree together, they might not be able to do it. However, wasn't there a 9th grade magical beast trying to break through inside the barrier? Why is there a strange tree here? As the light kept flashing above, everyone couldn't see clearly what was inside other than the tree. Fortunately, the colorful light above the barrier continued to converge toward the top. Below, another part of the barrier became transparent. The pressure became stronger and stronger. Obviously, that magical beast had successfully survived the 5th Tianlei. Whoosh! The sound of wings flapping and the sound of the wind suddenly came. A huge shadow was cast on the barrier. Half of the shadow was outlined. Mu Hongyu exclaimed, "That's really a wing. That must be the magical beasts." She couldn't hide her surprise and shouted at Chu Liyue. "Luyu, what we saw just now is that." Chu Liyue didn't respond. Mu Hongyu couldn't help but turn to look at her, only to see Chu Liyue staring at the barrier, her face full of shock. Luyu, what's wrong with you?" Mu Hongyu nudged her arm uneasily and asked softly, "What's wrong?" Chu Liyue's blood almost froze. She opened her mouth with difficulty. "Did you see the color of that wing?" Mu Hongyu was stunned. "Color? I think it's colorful. What's wrong?" Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Just now, that half of the wing, she couldn't be more familiar with it. That was the wing of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 704. Chu Liyue's body stiffened. Only her heart was beating violently, as though it was going to jump out of her mouth. Her mind was blank. Back then, she had been forced into a desperate situation and had resolutely chosen to commit suicide. But before that, she had specially released the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Generally speaking, when the owner died, the contracted magical beast would definitely die along with it. At that time, Chu Liyue had forcefully removed the contract between them, hoping that her choice wouldn't affect it. However, the situation was critical. Even Chu Liyue didn't know what had happened in the end. Previously, she had asked around, and the news she got was that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant was dead. Even though Chu Liyue was extremely sorrowful, she had gradually accepted this matter and buried it deep in her heart. Originally, she thought that this matter would forever pass like this, and that no one would remember that there was a 9-colored heavenly pheasant in this world that had accompanied her for many years. But now, that half a wing that suddenly flashed past stunned Chu Liyue. A preposterous thought appeared in her mind. Probably, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant from back then was actually still alive. Chu Liyue's eyes didn't blink as she stared at the rainbow-colored barrier in front of her. That's right. This barrier is also rainbow-colored. Upon closer inspection, isn't it exactly the same color as the 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Chu Liyue's hands clenched tightly in her sleeves. Her heart felt like it was being hung by something. Her chest felt empty, but it also felt like it was being crazily squeezed by something. It was so uncomfortable that she couldn't speak. If the 9th-grade magical beast inside is really, but what if it isn't? Chu Liyue's knuckles turned white. After the surging anticipation and desire, a trace of fear actually appeared. Although the 9-colored heavenly pheasant was rare, there wasn't only one in this world. Two thoughts were crazily fighting in Chu Liyue's mind. One was thinking, maybe it is? Maybe I really received pity from the heavens and returned my magical beast to me? The other was thinking, how can there be such a coincidence in this world? If not, then wouldn't I have been happy for nothing? Sometimes, giving people hope and then letting them be disappointed was even harder to accept than not having any hope at all. Chu Liyue's eyes were dry. Her throat seemed to be blocked by something, and her limbs were cold. She had already lost too much and definitely didn't want to experience such pain again. Mu Hongyu was worried when she saw that Chu Liyue's expression was off. Luyu, what's wrong with you? She had never seen Chu Liyue had such an expression. She seemed to be something. Is she to be to look to the magical beast inside the barrier to? But, Chu Liyue lightly shook her head. Li, how do you to her to be to her to be to be to? To be to Mu Hongyu pressed her lips against each other. Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't seem to want to say anything, and that her attention was still on the fiend that was breaking through, she could only swallow her words. Forget it, I'll ask her what's going on later. Suddenly, Mu Hongyu caught a glimpse of Dumpling, who was squatting on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Her body seemed to have flashed with a colorful light. It was fleeting. Mu Hongyu blinked and took a closer look. She found that the light had disappeared. Dumpling was still the same Dumpling. Her body was furry and blood-red, and she didn't seem to have changed. Maybe I saw wrongly, Mu Hongyu rubbed her eyes. Staring at the colorful barrier, she felt like she was about to start hallucinating. Dumpling quietly leaned against Chu Liyue's neck. Chu Liyue didn't look back, but subconsciously patted her body. If she turned her head to look, she would see that Dumpling's eyes were closed. And between her eyebrows, there was a faint flash of light. But Chu Liyue didn't see any of this. She only raised her head to take a look. Among the layers of rolling dark clouds, the 6th Tianlei had gathered. Now, she was more anxious than anyone else. She couldn't wait for the remaining Tianlei to fall. As long as the colorful barrier faded and became transparent, she would be able to see the situation inside. Also, she wanted to know if the demonic beast that was breaking through inside was what she guessed. The waiting time seemed to be unbearable. Chu Liyue counted silently in her heart. Finally, boom! The 6th Tianlei fell with a loud bang. Boom boom boom. The power of each Tianlei was stronger than the previous Tianlei. When the 6th Tianlei fell, it even tore the void apart. Behind it, a straight black spatial crack stretched across the sky. It slashed down from top to bottom. Violent energy shockwaves spread out in all directions, sweeping across everything in its path. All the trees in the vicinity were overturned. Even Lei Laosi, who was guarding at the front, was forced back by 3 steps. He cursed in his heart, and the hammer in his hand fell harshly to the ground. A barrier instantly appeared in front of him. He turned back and shouted at Chu Liyue and the rest. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Are you looking for death by standing so close? I'm supposed to stay here to guard. Why are they joining in the fun? Qi. A formless wave of energy surged forth. It went straight for Chu Liyue. Chang Wanzhou's expression turned cold, and he immediately went forward. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. Boom! The two forces collided harshly. Mu Hongyu immediately pulled Chu Liyue's arm and wanted to retreat with her. Luyu, quickly go. This position is simply too dangerous. However, Chu Liyue suddenly grabbed her hand and pushed it away slowly and firmly. Retreat first. Mu Hongyu was confused. What does that mean? You're not retreating with us. You're still going to stay here. Chu Liyue stared at the colorful barrier in front of her without blinking. The surrounding light was so bright that it was almost blinding. However, she could still clearly see that the colorful stream of light in the middle of the barrier was fading away quickly. She could already see the extremely thick branches and leaves of Wan Yeshan. Just a little more. Luyu. Mu Hongyu urged her again and grabbed her hand again. Yi Ranran also persuaded her. Luyu, Tianlei will only get stronger behind us. Let's retreat for a while first. No matter what Chu Luyue wanted to do, she had to protect her own life first, right? Chu Luyue looked at Chang Wanzhou in front of her and quickly ordered in a low voice. Little Zhou, take the two of them and leave first. Chang Wanzhou turned around. His delicate eyes were full of shock. Seeing Chu Luyue's determined expression, he pursed his lips and nodded gently. Since it was her order, he naturally had to obey it unconditionally. Chang Wanzhou quickly moved and pulled Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran back. The two of them were no match for Chang Wanzhou at all. They were taken away just like that. Boom! The seventh Tianlei struck fiercely. Chu Luyue clenched her fists and took a step forward. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 705. Lei Laosi heard the commotion and turned around to take a look. When he saw Chu Luyue advancing instead of retreating, he was instantly angered. Little brat, are you tired of living? Other people wouldn't even be able to escape in time, but she actually went forward. She really doesn't care about her own life. However, Chu Luyue didn't have any hesitation on her face. That pair of eyes that were as deep and bright as black jade was surging with an extremely firm and cold aura at this moment. Lei Laosi was about to scold her again when he saw her expression and was suddenly stunned. That beautiful face was filled with persistence, and there was even undisguised nobility and disdain between her brows. It was as though she was saying that no one in this world could stop her from doing what she wanted to do. This expression, this attitude, this high and mighty aura that made people submit to her, Lei Laosi had only seen it on one person before. The current Chu Luyue was like a completely different person from that cunning smile from before. For some reason, Lei Laosi suddenly felt that this face in front of him seemed to have gradually merged with a certain face in his memory. He shook his head harshly. Is he crazy? He actually compared Chu Luyue to Her Highness? But once this thought appeared, it seemed to have taken root in his heart and couldn't be removed no matter what. Just as he was hesitating, Chu Luyue took another step forward. She was standing 10 steps away from the barrier just now, but she was even closer now. You! Lei Laosi wanted to persuade her again, but Chu Luyue suddenly turned her gaze and glanced at him. That glance was extremely light and faint. Lei Laosi suddenly shuddered as though he was nailed to the ground by something. He swallowed the rest of his sentence back. Seems like, that glance just now really seems like it. So much so that for a moment he almost, is that Chu Luyue crazy? Is she crazy? Elder Qiushi, who had previously said that he was leaving to look for Shangguan Wan, was still standing not far away. He was glaring at Chu Luyue with a face full of shock and anger. He pointed a finger at Chu Luyue and trembled like a sieve. Mu Qinghe frowned. Chu Luyue was her business. What did it have to do with others? Elder Qiushi was so angry because he was worried that Chu Luyue would be closer to that demonic beast. He was afraid that the pavilion closest to the water would gain the moonlight first. He took a few steps back and said calmly, Elder Qiushi, if something really happens to her, she can only blame herself for not caring about her own life. Why are you so agitated? Furthermore, didn't you say that you were going to look for the third princess first? Elder Qiushi was at a loss for words. He wanted to find Shangguan Wan, but the 9th-ranked magical beast was here. His face flushed red. After a while he retorted. This old man is worried that Chu Luyue will ruin things because of his greed. At this moment, Mu Hongyu and the other two had already retreated to the back, and they happened to hear Elder Qiushi's words clearly. Mu Hongyu was already very worried about Chu Luyue. When she heard this, she was even angrier. I say, is this Elder Qiushi? What right do you have to say that about Luyu? What do you mean by her greed will ruin things? It's a 9th-ranked magical beast. What can Luyu do to it? Aren't you thinking too highly of our Luyu? They were now afraid that Lu Yu would be in danger, but he was still saying such things. Elder Qiushi said angrily, "You, who are you? How dare you talk back to me like this?" Yi Ranran kindly explained, "Elder Qiushi, this is Mu Hongyu. She's also the new disciple of Dragon Teeth Mountain's mountain master." Elder Qiushi was instantly speechless. In the entire Xiling, who didn't know that Jian Shai was a protective person? If they really angered him, it would really cause a lot of trouble. Elder Qiushi swallowed his anger and was at a loss. He waved his sleeve and rebuked angrily, "No matter who you are, Chu Luiyue is wrong for doing this. If we can't obtain the deity this time." At this point, Elder Qiushi suddenly remembered what happened earlier and immediately felt his palm hurt even more. His lips squirmed twice, and he changed his words. "If we can't successfully complete the mission this time, all the blame will be borne by Chu Luiyue alone." He's really twisting words and forcing logic. Mu Hongyu was so angry that she laughed. Yi Ranran's round little face also had a serious expression. Even Chang Wanzhou, who had been looking at Chu Luiyue, turned his head and glanced coldly at Elder Qiushi. Elder Qiushi only felt a chill on his body, and his heart inexplicably turned cold. Yi Ranran said, "Elder Qiushi, if you're really so considerate of the third princess, why don't you go over yourself now? This way, you don't have to worry about Lu Yu doing anything bad and affecting that divine beast. What do you think?" Elder Qiushi was choked half to death. He huffed and puffed until smoke came out of his head. Finally, he said, "Chu Luiyue alone is already risky enough in the past. How can I go too? The right thing to do is to wait and see." Mu Hongyu sneered. The scene fell into a strange silence. Elder Qiushi also realized that his words were very powerless, and his face turned red and white. Mu Qinghe finally spoke. "Elder Qiushi, why don't you go over there first and see how eldest young master is doing? Perhaps, eldest young master has a way to contact the third princess." Elder Qiushi turned around to take a look. Only then did he vaguely see a figure in the distance. That was Jiang Yuqing? Why is eldest young master there? He's injured and is recuperating for the time being, Mu Qinghe explained. You can go over and protect eldest young master while you're at it. Elder Qiushi was really speechless, thinking that it was so embarrassing here. He might as well leave first. Elder Qiushi thought for a moment and put on a worried expression. How can we let eldest young master stay alone in such a situation? I'll go first. With that, he really left. On the one hand, he didn't want to see Mu Hongyu and the others again. On the other hand, Jiang Yuqing's location wasn't very far from here. If something really happened here, he could quickly rush over from there. Of course, the most important thing was that he felt that Chu Luiyue was just courting death if he went over. It was impossible for him to cause any trouble. Then there was nothing to worry about. After he left, the remaining people finally quieted down. However, Chu Luiyue, who was standing in front, was unaware of this. 2/3 of the area of the huge barrier had become transparent. From where Chu Luiyue was, he could already see the branches of the thick tree. It seemed like there was something on this tree. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but take another step forward. The 8th Tianlei suddenly fell. Boom! The bright and dazzling light almost lit up the entire world. Chu Luiyue's sight was filled with white light. Suddenly, in the vast expanse of whiteness, a brilliant stream of colorful light quietly arrived. Almost all the colors on the barrier faded away, leaving only the last circle at the top. A magnificent feather floated down to the ground. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 706. Chu Luiyue's entire body stiffened. Only her heart was beating furiously, as though it was about to jump out of her mouth. Her mind was completely blank. Back then, she had been forced into a desperate situation and had resolutely chosen to commit suicide. But before that, she had specially released the 9-colored sky pheasant. Generally speaking, when a master died, their contracted magical beasts would definitely die as well. At that time, Chu Luiyue had forcefully rescinded the contract between them, hoping that her choice would not affect it. However, the situation had been dire. Even Chu Luiyue herself did not know what had happened in the end. Previously, She had tried to ask around indirectly, and the news she had received was that the 9-colored sky pheasant was already dead. Even though Chu Luyue was filled with grief, she had gradually accepted this matter and buried it deep in her heart. Originally, she had thought that this matter would pass by forever, and that no one would ever remember that there had been a 9-colored sky pheasant in this world that had accompanied her for many years. But now, that half of a wing that had suddenly swept past had completely dumbfounded Chu Luyue. An absurd idea popped up in her mind. Perhaps, possibly, probably, the 9-colored sky pheasant from back then was actually still alive. Chu Luyue's eyes did not blink as she stared at the colorful barrier in front of her. That's right. This barrier was also colorful. Upon closer inspection, wasn't it exactly the same color as the 9-colored sky pheasant's body? Chu Luyue clenched her fists tightly in her sleeves. Her heart felt like it was being hung by something, and her chest was empty. However, it also felt like it was being squeezed by something crazily, making her so uncomfortable that she could not speak. If the 9th-grade magical beast inside was really... But what if it wasn't? Chu Luyue's knuckles turned white. After the surging anticipation and desire, a trace of fear actually appeared. Although the 9-colored sky pheasant was rare, there was more than one in this world. Two thoughts were frantically fighting in Chu Luyue's mind. One was thinking, maybe it is? Maybe the heavens really took pity on her and returned her magical beast to her? The other was thinking, how could there be such a coincidence in this world? If it wasn't, then wasn't she rejoicing for nothing? Sometimes, giving people hope and then letting them down was even harder to accept than not having any hope at all. Chu Luyue's eyes were dry and her throat seemed to be blocked by something. Her limbs were cold. She had already lost too much. She definitely didn't want to experience such pain again. Mu Hongyu saw that there was something wrong with Chu Luyue's expression and felt worried. Luyue, what's wrong with you? She had almost never seen Chu Luyue reveal such an expression. It was as if she was waiting for something, but also as if she was afraid of something. Was she looking at the magical beasts inside the colorful barrier? But didn't she only see half a wing? Chu Luyue shook her head gently. I'm fine. How did this look like she was fine? Mu Hongyu pursed her lips. Seeing that Chu Luyue didn't seem to want to say more, and her attention was still on the magical beast that was breaking through, she could only swallow her words. Forget it. I'll ask her what's going on later. Suddenly, Mu Hongyu glanced out of the corner of her eye and accidentally saw Tuanzi, who was squatting on Chu Luyue's shoulder. There seemed to be a flash of colorful light on its body. It was fleeting. Mu Hongyu blinked and took a closer look, only to find that the light had disappeared. Tuanzi was still the original Tuanzi. Its whole body was furry and blood red. There didn't seem to be any change. Maybe she had seen it wrong. Mu Hongyu rubbed her eyes. She had been staring at the colorful barrier for so long that she felt like she was going to hallucinate. Tuanzi calmly leaned against Chu Luyue's neck. Chu Luyue didn't look back, but subconsciously patted its body. If she turned her head at this moment, she would see that Tuanzi's eyes were closed, and between its eyebrows, there was a faint flash of light. But Chu Luyue didn't see any of these. She just looked up. The 6th bolt of heavenly lightning had already gathered in the layers of dark clouds. Now she was more anxious than anyone else. She couldn't wait for all the remaining heavenly thunder to fall at once. As long as the light on the colorful barrier faded away and became transparent, she would be able to see what was going on inside. And she wanted to know if the magical beast that was breaking through inside was the same as she had guessed. The waiting time seemed to be particularly hard to bear. Chu Luyue counted silently in her heart. Finally, boom. The 6th heavenly thunder fell with a loud bang. Boom. Boom. The power of each heavenly thunder was stronger than the previous one. When the 6th heavenly thunder fell, it even tore through the void. Behind it, a straight black crack in space stretched across the sky. It came down from the top to the bottom. Violent energy ripples spread out in all directions, sweeping across the area. All the trees within the perimeter were overturned. Even Fourth Lei, who was guarding at the front, was forced back 3 steps. He cursed in his heart and smashed the hammer in his hand onto the ground. A barrier instantly appeared in front of him. He turned around and shouted at Chu Luiyue and the others. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and retreat. Were they looking for death by standing so close to him? He was going to stay here and be in charge of guarding. What were they doing here? Whoosh! An invisible wave surged over. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. Chang Wanzhou's expression turned slightly cold, and he immediately stepped forward. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. Boom! The two waves of energy collided violently. Mu Hongyu immediately grabbed Chu Luiyue's arm and was about to retreat with her. Luiyue, hurry up and leave. This position was too dangerous. However, Chu Luiyue suddenly grabbed her hand and then slowly and firmly pushed it away. Both of you retreat first. Mu Hongyu had a blank expression. What? What did that mean? You're not retreating with us. You're going to stay here. Chu Luiyue stared at the colorful barrier in front of her. Light shone around them, so bright that one couldn't open their eyes. However, she could still clearly see that the colorful flowing light in the middle of the barrier was fading away quickly. She could already see the thick branches and leaves of the curly fir tree. Just a little bit more. Luiyue. Mu Hongyu urged her again and grabbed her hand again. Luiyue, the heavenly thunder will only get stronger and stronger. Let's retreat a little first. No matter what Chu Luiyue wanted to do, they had to protect their own lives first, right? Chu Luiyue looked at Chang Wanzhou in front of him and quickly ordered in a low voice. Chu Luiyue looked at Chang Wanzhou, who was in front of him. Chang Wanzhou turned around, his exquisite eyes filled with shock. Seeing Chu Luiyue's determined expression, he pursed his lips and nodded slightly. Seeing Chu Luiyue's determined expression, he pursed his lips and nodded slightly. Since it was her order, he naturally had to obey it unconditionally. Chang Wanzhou moved quickly. He pulled Mu Hongyu and Yi Ran and retreated. The two of them were no match for Chang Wanzhou. They were taken away just like that. Rumble! The seventh Luiyue struck down ruthlessly. Chu Luiyue clenched her fists tightly and took a step forward. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 707. Shangguan hit her aura perfectly, so when she suddenly appeared, no one present actually noticed her existence in advance. So when her figure entered everyone's sight, it truly shocked everyone. She was stained with a bit of dirt, but it wasn't much. Compared to Jiang Yuqing and Elder Qiushi, it was almost negligible. At first glance, her hair was just a little messy, and 2 drops of blood splattered on her face. Right now, she was charging towards the barrier at full speed. She obviously wanted to attack the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was breaking through. The aura surging around her actually reached a shocking peak 7th grade. Chu Luiyue squinted her eyes, and a trace of coldness flashed past the corner of her eyes. Peak 7th grade, Shangguan's Yuan Meridian is crippled now, but she can actually still pretend to have such abilities. It can be seen that she spent a lot of effort. Seeing that she was getting closer and closer to the barrier, Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly surged with disgust. Even if this 9-colored heavenly pheasant had nothing to do with her, she wasn't willing to see Shangguan succeed. Shangguan didn't have the right to snatch it from the same clan of fiends that she once contracted with. Other people only thought that Shangguan came for the so-called mythical beast's blood. But Chu Luiyue was very clear that her motive for coming here was definitely not just this. Wanting to contract with a mythical beast. Why don't you see if you have the ability and luck to do so? Chu Luiyue paused in her footsteps, and a thought flashed across her mind. Lei Laosi, who was standing closest to the barrier, heard the commotion and immediately turned around to take a look. The next moment he saw Shangguan, who was rushing over aggressively. Lei Laosi was instantly enraged. Great. I haven't gone to look for them yet, but they all came to me one by one. Lei Laosi stomped his right foot harshly on the ground. The tall and sturdy figure immediately flew into the air. His speed was extremely fast. Only an afterimage was left on the spot, but he had already charged in front of Shangguan. At the same time, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. The series of actions was done smoothly. Zap! The black arrow instantly flew out. He tore through the air and left. Shangguan had actually been waiting in the nearby woods for quite some time. After she was separated from Elder Qiushi and the rest, she was trapped in the same place with more than 10 black cavalry soldiers and 5 to 6 sect disciples. It was also thanks to them that she was able to escape from that damned place. Of course, after she came out, those people would stay in the dirty and rotten swamp forever. After that, she searched aimlessly in the forest, hoping to find someone who was alone. However, it didn't take long for them to hear the commotion. Looking at the Tianlei falling one after another, what else was there to not understand? She couldn't care less about looking for him, and rushed over without stopping. After arriving here, she didn't advance rashly. Instead, she waited in the distance for an opportunity to arrive. From her position, she could see Lei Laosi and the group. She even saw Elder Qiushi and Jiang Yuqing who came later. However, out of caution, she did not come out and only waited patiently. At times like this, her mind was usually very sharp. Finally, she arrived at the 9th Tianlei. This was the best opportunity, and the only opportunity, because at this time, a 9th grade fiend's defense was the weakest. Hence, she rushed out without hesitation. However, she didn't expect Lei Laosi to be even faster. He actually blocked in front of her. Facing the black arrow that shot towards her glabella, Shang Guanwan's eyes darkened, and she flicked her wrist lightly. A black shield immediately appeared in front of her. Ding! The black arrow hit the black shield harshly and made a crisp sound. The arrowhead actually bent directly. On the other hand, that black shield didn't even have a scratch on it. Seeing the black shield that Shang Guanwan suddenly took out, Chu Luyue furrowed his brows slightly. On the other side, Mu Qinghe's expression was slightly cold, and a trace of complicated emotions flashed past the corner of his eyes. He didn't expect Shang Guanwan to actually take this for herself. Shang Guanwan scoffed. It's just a small trick. No matter who you are, get out of the way quickly. If you delay my matters, I won't let you off easily. Dahuang Swamp was also part of the Tianling dynasty's territory, so her identity was still the most honorable here. Normally, those who were tactful would turn pale with fright and move aside humbly. Shang Guanwan looked arrogant as she looked at Lei Laosi high up in the air, as though she was looking at an ant. However, the scene in her imagination didn't happen. Not only did Lei Laosi's face not reveal any shock or fear, but he became even more ferocious instead. His gaze swept past the black shield in front of Shang Guanwan, and the fury in his heart almost burst through the sky. There's actually such a shameless person in this world. Was this black shield something that she was worthy of? What is this? How dare you behave atrociously here? He put away the bow and arrows in his hands, and replaced them with a hammer. Without another word, he raised it high up. The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His knotted muscles tightened, and a vast aura surged around him. It rose crazily. In the end, it stopped at beginner stage 8. Shang Guanwan's heart skipped a beat. This Lei Laosi actually concealed his abilities previously. Beginner stage 8. How can I possibly be his opponent? The two of them were in a stalemate for a moment. At this moment, Chu Luyue was thinking about how to stop Shang Guanwan. Suddenly, a cool breeze brushed past her ears. She was shocked as she saw a red shadow scurrying out directly. It also went straight for that barrier. Dumpling! Chu Luyue shouted, but she couldn't stop Dumpling. She turned around and followed her without thinking. The aftermath of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant breaking through to become a legendary beast was extremely terrifying. Judging from this smell, this 9-colored heavenly pheasant's bloodline power was extremely rich, and it was basically about to break through successfully. With such a horrible bloodline pressure, Tuanzi would be crushed if she went there. Just as Chu Luyue followed her worriedly, Lei Laosi also noticed the situation here. Damn it! Both of them are so restless. If Shang Guanwan wanted to barge into this place, he definitely had to stop her. But what was going on with Chu Luyue? Didn't she want to leave just now? Did she think that she could barge into this barrier safely with her mediocre abilities? Damn girl! Go back! Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and directly cursed. Seeing that Chu Luyue didn't listen to a single word, and rushed over here without stopping, Lei Laosi became even more anxious. Damn it! That Chu Luyue is courting death herself. Why am I so anxious? Lei Laosi despised himself in his heart as he shouted in the other direction. You're too arrogant. Big brother. Do something. Shang Guanwan saw Chu Luyue rushing over here, and her lungs were about to explode from anger. How dare a lowly person dream of becoming a legendary beast? Dream on. She grabbed this gap, turned her feet slightly, and rushed over from another direction. Chu Luyue could clearly hear the commotion around her. However, she only wanted to bring Dumpling back. A terrifying shockwave carrying a gorgeous radiance suddenly spread out from the barrier. Chu Luyue's heart tightened. Dumpling. Poof. Dumpling's body flashed, and she actually went into that colorful energy wave. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 708. Tuan Zi's figure disappeared in an instant. That energy that was about to reach Chu Luyue seemed to have been stopped by an invisible hand, and then it quickly retreated. Chu Luyue looked at the empty space in front of her, as well as the barrier with a few faint ripples, and was dazed. What's going on? Not only did Dumpling disappear, but the energy that was halfway dispersed could actually be retracted. Chu Luyue closed her eyes and took a closer look to confirm that she didn't see wrongly. Everything that happened just now was real. Dumpling actually barged in unscathed. She saw clearly that when Dumpling went in, she indeed didn't suffer any threat or harm. It seemed like she went in naturally, as though she entered a place where there was no one. But standing here, Chu Luyue could still clearly feel the valiant suppression from the boundary. Why did it have to be Dumpling? Right at this moment, Chu Luyue suddenly felt a force surrounding her. She furrowed her brows and wanted to counterattack immediately. But the moment she was about to make a move, she suddenly realized something, and turned her head to look. A man stood in the forest over there. That man was tall, and his shoulders were straight. Like Lei Laosi, he was wearing a coarse hemp garment. He looked to be around 30 years old, and had an ordinary appearance. He was the kind that absolutely couldn't be recognized in a crowd. At this moment he was looking at Chu Luyue. To be precise, he was looking at the spot in front of Chu Luyue, where Dumpling disappeared. His long and narrow eyes were slightly deep, like a deep and quiet well that didn't have any ripples. Chu Luyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. This man's gaze seems a little familiar. This should be the big brother that Lei Laosi mentioned? That man waved his sleeves, and Chu Luyue's body moved uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, she was a few steps away from that man. Then that force disappeared quietly. The two of them faced each other. Chu Luyue's heart trembled. This man's ability was definitely not weaker than Lei Laosi, and might even be above him. Who exactly were these two people? Why were they guarding a 9-colored heavenly pheasant in this desolate and dangerous mystic forest Lin Jihong? From the color of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's wings, she could tell that it was extremely powerful. There was no need for these two people to stand guard here, even if it was to ensure sufficient safety when it broke through to become a divine beast. As long as the 9-colored heavenly pheasant gave the order, countless magical beasts would swarm over. Why did they have to pick two humans? Although these two people were indeed very strong, judging from the current situation, these two men were not the master of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Whether it was from the perspective of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant or the two of them, this matter was very strange. While Chu Luyue was thinking about these things in her heart, the man opposite her was also quietly sizing her up. That blood ferret is your contracted magical beast? He asked in a calm and slightly hoarse voice. Chu Luyue nodded. Who wouldn't be able to tell? Was there a need to ask? When that man heard that, his long and narrow eyes squinted, and dark waves surged in the bottom of his eyes. Chu Luyue felt that something was amiss. This man seems to be looking at my face? What's so good about my face? Chu Luyue wouldn't think that a person who could reach such a level of ability was swayed by her appearance. He seemed to be looking at another person through her. That magical beast of yours is a little interesting. He suddenly laughed and said. Chu Luyue couldn't figure out what he meant at that moment. In the end, she simply looked up and met his eyes. What exactly do you want to ask? Feel free to speak your mind. That man raised his brows slightly, as if he didn't expect Chu Luyue to be so direct. He suddenly raised his hand, Chu Liyue's expression changed slightly. For some reason, although she knew that this man was very strong to the point that he could kill her with one hand, she didn't feel threatened or uneasy at all. It was as if she was inexplicably certain that he wouldn't hurt her. She had always been a cautious person, and under normal circumstances, she definitely wouldn't have such feelings towards a stranger who suddenly appeared. Chu Liyue looked into his eyes, and a white light flashed across her mind. Wait, could this man be? Even the two of us can't enter this spirit formation. The man in front of her suddenly spoke as his hand brushed past Chu Liyue's ear and pointed behind her. Boom! The sound of a violent collision was suddenly heard. Chu Liyue suppressed the thoughts in her mind and turned around to look. Lei Laosi had blocked Shang Guanwan again. The two of them fought hand to hand. They fought head-on. Shang Guanwan was in front, but Lei Laosi was stronger, so the two of them ended up in a draw. Of course, Shang Guanwan wasn't as strong as him, so she quickly fell into a disadvantage and was defeated by Lei Laosi. If it weren't for her black shield, she wouldn't have been able to take it anymore. Seeing that she couldn't take it anymore, Shang Guanwan hurriedly turned around and asked Mu Qinghe and Elder Qiushi for help. Vice Admiral Mu, Elder Qiushi, what are you waiting for? Quickly come and help me. Elder Qiushi only hesitated for a moment and immediately planned to go forward. But just as he took a step forward, a bright light suddenly flashed in front of him. Something brushed past the tip of his nose and fell. A fiery pain came, and Elder Qiushi instinctively took a step back. Tut! He looked down and saw a palm-sized metal piece piercing into the ground in front of his feet. If it was slightly wrong, his feet would be in trouble. Elder Qiushi was drenched in cold sweat. It's just an abandoned metal piece, and it has such power. This man's ability is terrifying. Behind Elder Qiushi, Jiang Yuqing was sitting cross-legged. He was regulating his breathing and waited for the excruciating pain in his abdomen to dissipate before he simply dealt with the injuries on his body. The force in his body was also smoothed out smoothly, and he recovered a portion of his ability. Seeing Shang Guanwan coming over, he was a little unhappy, but he didn't show it. He was planning to go forward with Elder Qiushi when he encountered this attack head-on. Jiang Yuqing stood up and looked at the man who suddenly appeared, and his brows gradually furrowed. There are only a handful of people with such abilities in the Tianling dynasty. Who exactly is this person? Boom, boom, boom. An earth-shattering sound came from within the barrier. The last circle of colorful light at the top was rapidly fading away. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the huge barrier finally became completely transparent. The huge and sturdy one Yeshan was as tall as a canopy. A beautiful and incomparably noble nine-colored heavenly pheasant was standing on top of it. It was like a dazzling ray of light in the sky. It was very luxurious, and its aura was astonishing. There were some charred wounds on its body that were rapidly recovering. Its aura was also rapidly rising. It was about to break through to become a divine beast. Suddenly, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant slowly lowered its head and looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. Their eyes met. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. A shout almost jumped out from his throat. Little Jiu. Digression. My eyes are so dry. I'm not going to update today. I'll update at 12 tomorrow. I'll update depending on the situation. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 709. Even though time and space had changed, Chu Liyue could still recognize the nine-colored heavenly pheasant when she saw it. It was Little Nine who had accompanied her for countless days and nights. This was an absolute tacit understanding. It was an intuition that could only be formed after experiencing countless life and death situations together. Chu Liyue clenched her fists tightly, and her knuckles turned white. Her heart paused for a short while before it started to beat violently. The blood in her body also started to boil. She didn't know how much effort she had spent to restrain her impulse to go forward. However, her eyes were already sour, as if something had suddenly surged up and surrounded her. Little Nine. That's my Little Nine. She thought they were separated by life and death. She didn't expect to meet it again in this place. The disappointment and regret from before had all disappeared. What was left was endless surprise and joy. It was as if a flower had suddenly bloomed under the dust and was swaying with the wind. With just a slight movement, all the pain and hardships instantly became insignificant. Chu Luyue didn't even blink, as she was afraid that everything in front of her was just an illusion. Suddenly, her gaze stopped, and she saw that little Nine's eyes were actually gray. Chu Luyue was stunned on the spot. That's not right. Little Nine's eyes were usually black. When it used its power, it would change into a gorgeous color. It was never gray. Most importantly, there were no pupils in this pair of gray eyes. At first glance, they looked like two pieces of gray stone, without any spirituality. Although it was also looking at Chu Luyue, only Chu Luyue, who was looking at it, could see that the pair of eyes was actually like a dry well. It was lonely and empty without any emotions. After a moment, it calmly retracted its gaze. Chu Luyue's lips moved slightly, and she almost couldn't control herself as she took a step forward. Whoosh! The nine-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly flapped its wings. The wind shook. The leaves rustled. A violent gale spread out in all directions. The people standing nearby were all affected by the shockwave and were forced to retreat. Chu Luyue wanted to go forward, but was pulled back by the man behind her. On the other side, Lei Laosi and Sheng Guanwan, who were fighting, also separated. Lei Laosi wasn't paying attention and fell to the ground from the impact. He couldn't help but curse. F***ck, you're heartless. I've worked so hard to protect you. Why don't you go easy on me? But that nine-colored heavenly pheasant turned a deaf ear as if it didn't hear him. It seemed to be angry because the people around it disturbed its breakthrough. Lei Laosi instantly felt a headache. I must be crazy to tell it this. If it listened to his advice, why would he and Big Brother need to watch over it? Previously, it had spent most of its time sleeping. It didn't cause any trouble, and it was fine as long as it was quiet. Now it was about to break through, and its abilities increased. Its strength was changed. Not to mention Lei Laosi, even he was too. But it was because it was broken. It was because it did it. She used that black shield to block in front of her in a moment of desperation, and it almost blocked most of the power. So she didn't fall to the ground pathetically like Lei Laosi. She staggered a few steps and barely managed to stand up. She let out a sigh of relief, thinking that the black shield was much more useful than she had imagined. If it wasn't for this thing, she would have died a long time ago. Sheng Guanwan looked up at the nine-colored heavenly pheasant again and furrowed her brows. Why did it have to be the nine-colored heavenly pheasant? Previously, she was filled with all sorts of fantasies about this ninth-grade fiend. But she didn't expect it to be the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. If it were any other ninth-grade fiend, she wouldn't have any problems. Except for this nine-colored heavenly pheasant. This was Sheng Guanyu's fiend when she was alive. This made Sheng Guanwan feel a little uncomfortable. But she couldn't care so much now. Taking advantage of the fact that this thing hadn't completely broken through to become a legendary fiend was the best way to do it. Sheng Guanwan burned the force in her body crazily, tapped her toes and flew up again. She went straight for the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. As long as she plucked out the red feathers on its head, she could subdue it and become its master. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant tilted its head and glanced at Sheng Guanwan. Just as it was about to attack again, its vision suddenly landed on the black shield in front of Sheng Guanwan. There was a moment of hesitation in its actions. Sheng Guanwan was elated. This nine-colored heavenly pheasant doesn't seem to be so hostile towards me. Or perhaps its brain hasn't turned around yet, and it actually allowed me to get close to it. Perhaps the heavens are destined to let me obtain a legendary fiend. Sheng Guanwan was agitated, and because of her excitement, the corners of her eyes were red. In the blink of an eye, she was already in front of that barrier. Ripples suddenly appeared on the transparent barrier. A terrifying aura gradually gathered and condensed into a wave that spread towards Sheng Guanwan. Sheng Guanwan had witnessed how powerful this barrier was, so she raised the black shield with lingering fear and completely hid her body behind it. Buzz! The shockwave slammed heavily into the black shield. It let out a distant and heavy sound that spread far and wide. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant looked over here and still stared at the black shield closely. It tilted its head slightly and seemed to be thinking about something. That terrifying power shook Shangguanwan's arms that were holding onto the black shield until they were completely numb. Just as she was worried about what she should do next, she suddenly felt that heavy pressure disappear. She looked up and saw that the ripple was flowing along the black shield to both sides. An entrance suddenly appeared on the barrier. My chance is here. Shangguanwan was elated and immediately rushed into that entrance without thinking. Lei Laosi was so angry that his liver hurt when he saw this scene. You. Does this dumb thing know who that is? Why did it become so dumb after waking up from its sleep? Is it blind? Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be stirred by something. Shangguanwan clearly relied on that black shield to be able to go over. Little Nine didn't seem to remember her anymore, but it still had an inexplicable longing for her things. Chu Liyue clenched her teeth and also rushed over. This time, the man beside her didn't stop her and just stood with his hands behind his back as he watched Chu Liyue rush over. His long and narrow eyes squinted slightly, as if he was in deep thought. Chu Liyue was too fast and actually followed Shangguanwan into that entrance. Lei Laosi exclaimed, "Stupid girl, you're crazy. Come out quickly. That isn't a place that she can enter." Chu Liyue didn't turn back. She looked up at the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant also noticed her arrival. It flapped its wings, and a rainbow-colored stream of light wrapped around Chu Liyue tightly like a rope. Shangguanwan turned back and scoffed. "You're overestimating yourself." Chu Liyue felt as if her organs were being squeezed together harshly. She couldn't breathe, and her face rapidly flushed red. Her vision also turned black. However, she only looked at the nine-colored heavenly pheasant stubbornly. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant seemed to sense something, and finally looked over again. Chu Liyue's nose felt sour, but there was a smile at the corner of her lips. She opened her mouth and said silently, "Little Nine, it's me. Little Nine, it's me." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 710. Xiaojiu, it's me. There wasn't any sound. Just this silent sentence was enough to shake the heavens and earth. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant's gray eyes seemed to crack instantly. A trace of shock surged out from its eyes. The colorful flowing light that was tightening around Chu Liyue suddenly stopped. She looked up at it. That pair of eyes that were as calm as an ancient well finally had some ripples. Confusion, astonishment, shock, disbelief. Many complicated emotions surged up one after another. They intertwined together. Right at this moment, a red furry figure quietly scuttled up the tree trunk and arrived beside the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's red claws. It turned around and saw that Chu Liyue was still trapped in that colorful flowing light. Dumpling gritted her teeth angrily and bit the red claws next to her. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant was in pain. It lowered its head and looked at Dumpling innocently. Dumpling bared her teeth fiercely. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant lowered its head, feeling wronged. Shangguanwan originally wanted to watch a good show, but she realized that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly stopped. She turned around and followed its line of sight. Then she saw the blood ferret beside the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's feet. Shangguanwan frowned. Isn't that Chu Liyue's fiend? How did it barge in and get so close to the nine-colored heavenly pheasant? Isn't it afraid of the bloodline suppression? And it actually dared to bite the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Trying to break a rock with an egg. You're courting death. Shangguanwan sneered. Sure enough, like master, like magical beast. Chu Liyue was someone who didn't care about her life, and her fiend was even more so. Just like that, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant could easily crush it to death. Sensing Shangguanwan's gaze as if she was looking at a joke, Dumpling immediately glared back fiercely. What are you looking at? I'll even bite myself when I'm crazy. Chu Liyue also saw Dumpling. When did it run over there? She was planning to call Dumpling back, but she saw that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant had already flapped its wings and used a colorful ball to surround Dumpling. Dumpling floated up gently. In the end, It actually reached the top of the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's head. Chu Luiyue frowned and shook her head at the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Can't do that. Dumpling is also her fiend. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant glanced at Chu Luiyue before it directly opened its beak and swallowed the colorful ball. Then it slowly closed its eyes as Dumpling. Chu Luiyue exclaimed to Dumpling. Xiaojie really ate Tuanzi? Shang Guanwan watched from the side feeling happy. She to chew of it to choose it heavenly heavens, to be two of her, to be to her twos, to be to the bee. Young Mistress Chu, the inside of this barrier is the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's territory. Ordinary people can't enter. Your fiend is just a third-grade blood ferret. How can it withstand the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's suppression? As I see it, you should quickly leave as well. Otherwise, even I might not be able to protect you. Chu Luiyue glanced at her coldly. Shang Guanwan was indeed Shang Guanwan. She could still show such fake concern at such a time. Didn't she find it disgusting? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and realized that the connection between her and Dumpling hadn't been cut off, which meant that it was still alive. She felt more at ease. Dumpling wasn't an ordinary blood ferret. Since it dared to come here, it definitely had the ability to protect itself. Why don't I call little Nine back and ask it to spit out Dumpling? Chu Luiyue asked plainly. It seems like Third Princess is confident in subduing this nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Shang Guanwan's eyes were filled with unconcealable delight. That nine-colored heavenly pheasant obviously treated her differently. It might have already chosen her as its master. It was naturally different from others. Contracting a fiend, especially a high-grade fiend or even a divine beast, depends on fate. Since this nine-colored heavenly pheasant has chosen me, then, boom! A shocking aura suddenly exploded from the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's body. Gorgeous red flowing light spread out from its feathers and quickly healed the scars caused by Tianlei. At the same time, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. It spread its wings, and its body was so huge that it almost covered the sky. In the next moment, it changed its direction and flew towards Shang Guanwan. Shang Guanwan was nervous and happy. Is it going to recognize me as its master? Her heart thumped, and the blood in her body flowed rapidly as though it was about to boil. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Once it breaks through, it will become a divine beast. By then, everyone in the Tianling dynasty will know that she, Shang Guanwan, has contracted a divine beast. Shang Guanyu is so powerful, but didn't she only contract a ninth-grade fiend? As long as today's matter is successful, everyone will know that I, Shang Guanwan, am 100 times stronger than Shang Guanyu. Countless scenes appeared in Shang Guanwan's mind, causing her to tremble in excitement. She took a step forward. As long as I can contract, swoosh. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant swooped down, stuck close to Shang Guanwan, and flew over her head. At the same time, its sharp claws scratched Shang Guanwan's arm. Blood flowed from the wound, and it was so deep that her bones could be seen. Ah! Shang Guanwan was caught off guard. She exclaimed and uncontrollably took a few steps back. She looked at her arm in a panic, but she didn't have time to check her injury. That was because the black shield had been snatched away. Shang Guanwan hurriedly looked up and saw that the black shield was being held tightly by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. She was about to chase after it when she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her arm. She lowered her head, and her eyes immediately widened in horror. She saw a few streaks of colorful flowing light at the edge of the scratches. The colorful flowing light looked gorgeous and magnificent, but in fact, it was wrapped in a terrifyingly high temperature. When it swam back and forth, it was as though it was being roasted by flames. What was even more terrifying was that Shang Guanwan realized that her wound was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wound that was already deep enough to see the bone was continuously torn apart by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's power. Intense pain came, and Shang Guanwan's mind went blank from the pain, and she almost fainted. Ah! She screamed hysterically and fell to the ground, curling up into a ball in extreme pain. No, no! A muffled moan came out of her mouth, and it was filled with deep fear. No one knew that the force in Shang Guanwan's body was being devoured crazily, and that colorful flowing light had already spread to her shoulders. Looking from afar, both of her arms were already festering, and it was very terrifying. Chu Liyue looked at her and narrowed her eyes. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant's attack just now was a mixture of its and Tianlei's power. Shang Guanwan naturally couldn't withstand it. She looked up at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was flying in circles in the sky. Little 9 was targeting Shang Guanwan like this. Could it be that it thought of something? Right at this moment, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly let out a clear cry. Screech! The clear and melodious cry resounded throughout heaven and earth. One of the colorful feathers on its wings suddenly transformed into a scarlet-red color. Chu Liyue suddenly felt as though something in her body had been stirred up. A moment later, a tinge of shock flashed across her eyes. That was Dumpling's aura. Digression. The rest of the third night watch will be updated at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:11. Chu Liyue almost couldn't believe it. She checked again carefully, and realized that Dumpling's aura was indeed changing along with the changes on the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's body. A bold and absurd thought suddenly appeared in Chu Liyue's mind. Could it be that Dumpling and Little 9, gradually, the colorful feathers turned crimson red. It was like a burning flame that swept across. Chu Liyue couldn't be more familiar with such a red color, because it was exactly the same color as Dumpling's body. Recalling the scene where Dumpling was wrapped in a ball and swallowed by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant, Chu Liyue's eyes flickered and her emotions fluctuated. As the crimson colors appeared, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's aura also rose crazily. Under the dark sky, it was the most dazzling existence. Chu Liyue looked up and countless scenes flashed across her mind. The first time she saw Dumpling was in the forest outside the imperial city. It came out from a pile of fallen leaves, and seemed to have slept for a long time. It followed her while swaying. She didn't plan to bring a blood ferret with her at first. However, it was very persistent and stuck to her like a little tail. Then, she met the black flying python. Dumpling blocked in front of her without hesitation. Even though its small body was not even as big as one of the black flying python's eyes, it still rushed forward. It didn't care about anything else and charged forward. It was covered in wounds, but it never regretted it. After that, they accompanied each other day and night, and they followed each other through life and death. Speaking of which, it could be summarized in 2 or 3 sentences. However, only she knew how much was involved and what kind of meaning it had. She didn't feel it back then, but now that she thought about it, there were traces everywhere. In this world, how could there be a magical beast that would willingly give up its life for a complete stranger without any scruples? It often slacked off and acted coquettishly. It liked to fight with the red demon. It trusted and relied on her completely. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh, but the corners of her eyes were wet. A teardrop silently slid down her cheek and disappeared into her hair. The aura that kept increasing in her body was unfamiliar yet familiar. It was Dumpling. It was also Little 9. After going around in circles, it had always been by her side. No. Shang Guanwan tossed and turned in pain, and kept moaning in pain. Third princess. Everyone outside the barrier also saw the situation here. They all fell into a great shock, and were silent for a long time. Shang Guanwan's cry of pain finally made them come back to their senses. Elder Qiushi hurriedly rushed over. If he really couldn't explain himself. However, as soon as he reached the barrier, he ran into a dilemma. How was he going to get in there? Shang Guanwan and Chu Liyue could only enter, because an entrance appeared on the barrier. But now the entrance was sealed. The huge transparent barrier glowed faintly, and had an extremely strong aura. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to force his way in. He looked at Mu Qinghe, who was standing at the side and didn't say much. Vice Admiral Mu, do you have a way to enter this barrier? The third princess is in a bad situation. If we don't save her as soon as possible, I'm afraid. Mu Qinghe was looking at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the barrier and frowned. This 9-colored heavenly pheasant. It didn't look like that one. But why did he feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? Hearing Elder Choshi's words, he turned his gaze and thought for a moment. He said in a deep voice, "Even if we work together, it should be very difficult to open this barrier. Unless that nine-colored heavenly pheasant is willing to let us in." He was close and saw clearly just now that Shangguan could go in, because the barrier was opened by herself. Elder Choshi was very anxious. Then what should we do? Could it be that we are just going to watch and do nothing? Jiang Yuqing pursed his lips. Suddenly, Jiang Yuqing's voice came from behind. "Ask Chu Luiyue." Elder Choshi and Mu Qinghe turned around at the same time. "Eldest young master, you mean?" Elder Choshi was confused. After this period of rest, Jiang Yuqing had more or less recuperated his body. He lifted his chin. "Didn't Chu Luiyue go in too?" "But eldest young master, she just took advantage of the situation and followed the third princess in." "Why?" "That nine-colored heavenly pheasant hasn't launched a fatal attack on her until now. Isn't that enough to explain the problem?" Jiang Yuqing glanced at Elder Choshi coldly. Elder Choshi was stunned and immediately understood. That's right. Although Chu Luiyue's fiend was eaten by that nine-colored heavenly pheasant, she was still standing there perfectly fine. Other than the time when the nine-colored heavenly pheasant attacked her at the very beginning, it seemed to have treated her as if she was invisible. And the only time it attacked her, it didn't cause any substantial damage to Chu Luiyue. Instead, it was Shangguan. He thought that she could form a contract, but he didn't expect her to lose half of her life in the blink of an eye. After understanding this, Elder Choshi finally understood Jiang Yuqing's intention. However, he was still in a difficult position. "Eldest young master, you might not know this, but that Chu Luiyue is stubborn and has some opinions about me. He definitely wouldn't get any results if he went to ask. The last general can just go." Mu Qinghe suddenly spoke. Jiang Yuqing nodded. Elder Choshi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Mu Qinghe turned around and walked toward Chu Luiyue. Actually, other than that barrier, the distance between the two of them wasn't considered far. However, to Mu Qinghe, her legs seemed to be filled with lead, and each step was heavier than the previous one. There seemed to be a huge rock pressing down on his heart, making him unable to breathe. His mind was in a mess. Nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Is that nine-colored heavenly pheasant? Lei Laosi didn't feel good after seeing Chu Luiyue enter with Shangguan. He and Big Brother had guarded this place for so many days and nights, but they couldn't enter this barrier. Yet those two entered so easily. How can this be? However, when he had nowhere to vent his anger, and even started to consider quitting, he saw that nine-colored heavenly pheasant attacking Shangguan. Seeing Shangguan lying on the ground with her arms festering in pain, Lei Laosi finally vented his anger. "Great. Right now, Big Brother and I still can't do anything to Shangguan and the rest openly. But who can object to this nine-colored heavenly pheasant attacking? I didn't watch over you for nothing." Lei Laosi felt good as his gaze landed on Chu Luiyue again. That's strange. Why is this girl completely fine? He looked at his big brother and was about to ask for his opinion when he saw him staring at Chu Luiyue with an obscure gaze. Lei Laosi's heart skipped a beat, and he limped over. "Big brother, what are you thinking about?" That man's lips slowly curled up. "I'm thinking that we shouldn't continue to wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 7:12. Lei Laosi was stunned as he looked at him in disbelief. "What? Big brother, you mean?" Immediately after, Lei Laosi suddenly thought of something and quickly looked up. Right. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant only started to transform into a legendary beast after swallowing that blood ferret. Could it be Chu Luiyue? Lei Laosi turned his gaze and looked at the young lady in red standing inside the barrier. She was slender, and her shoulders were thin, but her back was very straight. The wind and clouds moved around her, but she stood proudly as though nothing in this world could make her bend her back. He suddenly recalled Chu Luiyue's gaze when she said that she wanted to enter the barrier. So determined, so persistent, so unparalleled. That blood ferret was her contracted fiend, and from what she said, It was indeed that blood ferret that brought them here. The most important thing was that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant had already tried to kill Shengguan. But it didn't hurt Chu Luiyue at all. With so many clues added together, it was enough to prove one thing. Chu Luiyue, Lei Laosi was agitated, and his hand that was holding the hammer trembled slightly. As he stared at Chu Luiyue's figure, he tried his best to control his emotions and lowered his voice. "Big brother, are you sure? This is a serious matter, so I have to be very careful." That man's smile deepened slightly. "Just watch." Lei Laosi's heart was scratching. "Ah, what do you mean by just watch? Is it true or not? Give me a definite answer." But that man wasn't willing to say anything else. Lei Laosi could only restrain himself. No matter what the result was, he just had to wait for the nine-colored heavenly pheasant to complete its breakthrough. Mu Qinghe walked to the front of the barrier. The turbulent and powerful suppression was like a small mountain pressing down on his body, making it difficult for him to take every step forward. Even the force circulation in his body slowed down, but he still got close to where Chu Luiyue was. Before he could speak, Chu Luiyue turned around as though she sensed something. Her eyes were bright, clean, and deep like black jade. Mu Qinghe choked on his words. "How did you go in?" Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. "Didn't Vice Admiral Mu see everything that happened just now? I followed the third princess in." Mu Qinghe paused for a moment and said straightforwardly, "Do you have a way to help us go in? Or, you can send the third princess out." Anyone could tell that it was impossible for Shengguan to subdue this nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Moreover, it was about to break through to become a divine beast. By then it's Qinghe. She's Qinghe. Chu Luiyue glanced at Shengguan, knitted her brows and hesitated. "This, Lieutenant Mu, do you think that I have such an ability? You probably forgot that my fiend was also swallowed by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. I can't even go out now, so I naturally don't know how to send the third princess out. Why should I send her out? Isn't it good for her to stay here? Shengguan is greedy. She wants to occupy the nine-colored heavenly pheasant, but she didn't think about where she got the right to do so." Mu Qinghe's expression was solemn. "Is there really no way?" Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. "I couldn't tell that Vice Admiral Mu is really loyal to the third princess." Mu Qinghe's heart suddenly felt like it was stabbed by something. "But I'm very sorry. I really don't have this ability. Why don't you ask those two?" Mu Qinghe knew that Chu Luiyue was talking about Lei Laosi and the other two, not to mention whether they would help. Even if they were willing, those two probably wouldn't be able to do it. Otherwise, Lei Laosi wouldn't be in such a sorry state just now. Screech. A clear screech was heard once again. Chu Luiyue immediately turned back to take a look. Currently, half of the feathers on the nine-colored heavenly pheasant had already turned crimson red. Splash! Its huge wings suddenly vibrated. In an instant the wind and clouds surged. The huge one Yeshan swayed with the wind. Piak! An incomparably thick tree root suddenly rose up from the ground. It slammed toward Shengguan. This tree was the biggest tree in the entire Mystic Sun Forest, and its root naturally couldn't be underestimated. That tree root was so thick that it would take two people to wrap their arms around it. Also, it was crystal clear and filled with blood-red liquid. A strong smell of blood spread across the place. Everyone's expression changed simultaneously. Needless to say, Jiang Yuqing and the rest had personally experienced how powerful this tree root was. Third princess. That tree root was about to land on Shengguan. At this moment, Shengguan suddenly seemed to have realized something and looked up. When she saw that thick tree root flying toward her, fear flashed across Shengguan's face. Immediately after, she seemed to have made up her mind, and a ruthless glint flashed across her eyes. "I can't care so much anymore." The next moment, Shengguan's aura suddenly surged. She quickly got up and left an afterimage on the spot. Bang! That tree root ruthlessly slammed onto the spot where Shengguan was just now. Countless cracks instantly spread out on the ground. A deep gully appeared in a split second. Shengguan's afterimage was also instantly shattered. However, she was still able to avoid this attack. Chu Luiyue immediately looked over, and his eyes narrowed dangerously. Shengguan's aura was actually still surging rapidly. She was only at peak stage 7 just now, but she actually broke through to stage 8 right now. She reached the same stage as Lei Laosi. A chilly aura emanated from Sheng Guanwan's body. In an instant, her face and body were actually covered with a thin layer of frost. Sheng Guanwan indeed still held back previously. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking, he saw Sheng Guanwan raise her hand. A sharp white icicle suddenly appeared in her hand. However, in the center of that white icicle, there seemed to be a drop of crimson blood. The terrifying aura was emanating from that drop of blood. Chu Luiyue's heart shuddered. That blood was swoosh. Sheng Guanwan had already taken action. She ruthlessly stabbed that icicle into the tree root in front of her. Then she slashed it forcefully. Rip, blood splattered everywhere. Sheng Guanwan's face and body were instantly covered with scarlet bloodstains. It looked eerie and terrifying. However, an even more terrifying scene appeared next. Those bloodstains that splattered on the icicle were actually rapidly absorbed by the icicle. All of them gathered into that drop of blood in the center. From afar, the color of that drop of blood in the center seemed to have become even denser, and it even faintly turned black. Sheng Guanwan happened to be holding onto the center of that icicle. So this scene was only seen by Chu Luiyue, who was standing nearby. Chu Luiyue only felt a chill run up from the bottom of his feet. There's something wrong with that icicle. Her gaze shifted slightly, and she looked at Sheng Guanwan again. However, she shockingly discovered that her injuries were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Mobile users, please browse and read. A more high-quality reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 713. At this moment, Sheng Guanwan completely ignored the gazes of the outside world. She held the icicle and looked at the blood-red liquid flowing all over the roots in front of her. She was pleasantly surprised. The thick smell of blood spread, and it was nauseating. However, this smell made Sheng Guanwan even more excited. This one Yeshan indeed lives by consuming human blood. The biggest one in the middle should be the mother tree of all the Wan Yeshan in the mystic forest. If I control this Wan Yeshan, doesn't that mean all those people who are still trapped underground will be mine? This would be many times more convenient than my previous plan. Screech. A painful shriek was heard. Chu Luiyue quickly looked up and saw that the remaining half of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's feathers didn't turn red for a long time. Even the parts that had turned red started to turn back to their original colors. Chu Luiyue's heart sank harshly. Could this be the sign of a failed breakthrough? It hovered in midair and flapped its wings anxiously. Chu Luiyue clearly saw that the red color on one of its wings that had just transformed was gradually fading. The most important thing was that the rolling dark clouds in the sky were also showing signs of dissipating and were gradually drifting in all directions. Even if Chu Luiyue hadn't seen the scene of a 9th-grade fiend breaking through to a mythical beast, he knew one thing. Under normal circumstances, the phenomenon would only disappear after a successful breakthrough. But now, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant was only halfway through its breakthrough, and it actually started. This could only prove that Chu Luiyue's guess wasn't wrong. He didn't know what problem the 9-colored heavenly pheasant encountered, but it was stuck at this last stage. If it couldn't successfully break through to become a mythical beast this time, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's abilities would decrease greatly. There was even a possibility that it wouldn't be able to break through to become a mythical beast in this lifetime. Chu Luiyue's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Big brother, what's going on? Is that fellow going to fail? The others below also noticed that something was amiss, and their expressions changed. A hint of panic flashed past Lei Laoxi's eyes as he looked at his big brother. How could this be? For such a long time, we have been watching carefully, not leaving each other's side at all. There have been no mistakes at all. Logically speaking, it should be able to succeed. One must know that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant had been in a deep slumber for close to 2 years. It was its own choice to break through to divine beast today. If it didn't have absolute confidence, it wouldn't have done that. Nothing is absolute. The man's expression was calm as his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. The probability of a ninth-grade magical beast successfully breaking through to become a divine beast is actually less than half. Besides, moreover, this 9-colored heavenly pheasant was very different from other ninth-grade magical beasts. Lei Laosi was speechless, and his face was a little pale. But, this is that person's magical beast. How could her magical beast fail? Back then, the fact that it was able to survive in such a desperate situation was already enough to explain many things. At the very least, he had never thought of a second possibility other than success. Let's wait and see. The dark clouds haven't completely dispersed yet. Until then there was still time. Lei Laosi held the hammer in his hands tightly and looked up anxiously. Anyway, I think it will definitely work, he muttered to himself as if he was convincing himself, and also as if it was some kind of firm obsession. Ah, why is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's color changing back again? Mu Hongyu exclaimed. Yi Ranran furrowed his brows, and his face was solemn. I'm afraid not good. How can it be so easy to break through to become a divine beast? You're saying that it's going to fail? Mu Hongyu was still in disbelief. That 9-colored heavenly pheasant was clearly fine just now. Could it be that even such a powerful 9th-grade magical beast couldn't successfully cross that threshold? The golden mane bear cub suddenly appeared in Mu Hongyu's arms again. Mu Hongyu's arms sank, and she hurriedly hugged it. Song, what are you doing? She thought that it was frightened by the commotion, but after the golden mane bear cub came out, it just stayed in her arms obediently and looked at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the sky with a nervous expression. Mu Hongyu didn't understand what was going on. Why does Song look like? Not only is it not afraid, but it's also very worried about that 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Mu Qinghe also looked up, but he quickly retracted his gaze and looked at Shang Guanwan again with a solemn expression. When Shang Guanwan attacked just now, there seemed to be something wrong. Your Highness. The moment he spoke, he heard a gust of wind by his ear. A green figure flashed past his eyes rapidly. He was shocked. Hong Yao. Hong Yao turned around and glanced at him, but it didn't stop. Voila! Green flames quickly ignited on its body. Its aura increased rapidly. Mu Qinghe's expression changed slightly. What is it planning to do? Hong Yao, come back. He scolded sternly. Hong Yao flapped its wings and flew toward the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was hovering in midair. Mu Qinghe was about to chase after it when he suddenly heard a loud sound. Boom! He turned around and saw that the ground in front of Shang Guanwan had suddenly collapsed. The ravine was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. Jiang Yuqing also noticed the commotion here. His expression changed drastically, and he immediately went forward. At this moment a tree root swept over. Shang Guanwan actually jumped down. Your Highness! Shang Guanwan's figure instantly disappeared in front of everyone. It's so dangerous down there. Why is she still going down? Almost at the same time, Chu Liyue tapped her toes and shot into the sky like an arrow. She was actually going for the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Liu, Mu Hongyu and the rest were shocked. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant was about to fail its breakthrough, and its aura was already surging. Wasn't she courting death by going over at this moment? Chu Liyue turned a deaf ear to these voices. She suddenly raised her aura, and her speed became even faster. At this moment, only the area around the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's head was left red. The rest of its body had turned colorful again. However, although it was colorful, it was very different from the luxurious and beautiful appearance from before. Upon closer inspection, its body seemed to be covered with a layer of dust. Its entire body was gray and lifeless. Chu Liyue's heart felt as if it was pierced by a sharp blade. It was painful. She gritted her teeth and charged over without a care. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant seemed to have sensed someone approaching and flapped its wings alertly. The fierce and chaotic power transformed into streams of light and scattered in all directions. Many wounds were quickly left on Chu Liyue's body. However, she was still moving forward. She directly arrived in front of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Screech! The 9-colored heavenly pheasant flapped its wings and instantly surrounded Chu Liyue's figure. A vast and mighty pressure descended. A chilling murderous aura enveloped her. Chu Liyue's clothes and long black hair fluttered in the wind. The biting cold aura approached, and its sharp claws pierced her neck. Dark red blood instantly gushed out. Chu Liyue's eyes were red, but she was persistent and firm. She said, "Xiaojiu, I'm back. You come back too, okay?" Her voice was so soft that it could be easily blown away by the wind. However, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant heard it. Its eyes, which had been closed all this time, finally opened. Amidst the dull gray color, a gorgeous colorful light suddenly erupted. Dark clouds gathered in the sky again. Boiling hot and sparkling tears fell from its magnificent eyes. "Master summons. My return. Digression, today is even more over. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 714. The blood that gushed out from Chu Liyue's neck was quickly absorbed by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. The crimson-red claws became even brighter. As though it was suddenly injected with abundant energy, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant let out a clear cry. Screech. This cry was different from the painful cry from before. It was melodious, nostalgic, joyful. It was the joy of finally seeing hope after enduring a long wait. In those countless dark days it was chaotic, lost, and lonely. Now it could finally meet again. The layer of gray on the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's body quickly faded. The feathers all over its body became bright again. Then, a smear of red spread rapidly. Those colorful feathers started to turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Only that pair of eyes were like magnificent rainbow-colored crystals, dazzling and brilliant. Dark clouds rolled in the surroundings and the wind whistled. However, the space surrounded by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's wings was incomparably quiet and peaceful. The vast pressure on Chu Liyue instantly dissipated. Chu Liyue suddenly felt something pushing her from behind. It was the nine-colored heavenly pheasant's wings. She was even closer to it. So close that she could see her own reflection in that pair of gem-like eyes. Chu Liyue slowly stretched out her hand and wiped away its tears. She couldn't be more familiar with that gaze. It's Dumpling. It's little Nine again. There's Dumpling's coquettish nostalgia, and little Nine's unparalleled nobility. Chu Liyue choked, and her voice trembled slightly. "You're little Nine, and also Dumpling, right?" The nine-colored heavenly pheasant lowered its head and leaned close to her cheek, gently rubbing against it. Chu Liyue closed her eyes, and hot tears fell silently. Even though she already had some guesses in her heart still couldn't help but tremble when she received a definite answer. She had regained what she had lost. Perhaps there was nothing in the world that could make her feel more fortunate and happy than this. Chu Liyue's chest seemed to be filled with something, and surprise and nostalgia almost overflowed from the depths of her heart. It's still here, it's back. She once thought that she had lost everything. But, no, it was still waiting for her. Chu Liyue opened his bloodshot eyes. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant carefully wiped away the tears on her face. Chu Liyue looked at it. In an instant, many things flashed through his mind. Now that the truth was out, it was as if there was an invisible string that connected all those things together. Dumpling stubbornly brought her here. That colorful barrier lay Lousy and the other two in charge of guarding. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. So it really was the two of them. Previously, she didn't dare to believe it. After all, from all aspects, the two of them were too different from before. Even she, who was standing right in front of them, did not dare to confirm their identities. However, since little Jiu was here, and Lei Lousy and the rest had been guarding this place, everything was confirmed. Chu Liyue took half a step back and looked at little Nine. At this moment, only its tail was left on its body, and it hadn't turned red yet. "I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again. I didn't expect. Not only can I see you again, but I can also watch you break through." Little Jiu's eyes shone brightly. Suddenly, there was a hurried screech behind her. Chu Liyue turned around and saw that Hong Yao had flown over unknowingly. As Chu Liyue's body was tightly wrapped in little Jiu's wings, Hong Yao could only fly to the top to look down. Chu Liyue looked up slightly and saw Hong Yao hovering above anxiously, staring at her closely. She smiled brightly, and her eyes were curved. Seeing that Chu Luyue seemed to be fine, Hong Yao finally heaved a sigh of relief. But then, it realized that there was a wound on Chu Luyue's neck that was just cut open. It was even bloody. Hong Yao widened its eyes instantly and looked at little Jiu furiously. Is this fellow crazy? How could it be so heavy-handed to me? Little Nine and Hong Yao had always disliked each other. Every time they met, they would at least fight. But this time, it knew it was in the wrong, so it guiltily avoided Red Demon's eyes. The Red Demon was even angrier. It flapped its wings crazily, and its small body was almost curled into a ball. It rushed over without a second thought. It couldn't even bear to hurt a single strand of her hair. But this fellow actually cut her neck. Ah, bang! When the Red Demon hit the barrier, it finally stopped. Chu Luyue was speechless. It seemed that Hong Yao had also seen through Little Nine's identity, which was why he was so unforgiving. However, it didn't seem to realize that the current Little Nine was even stronger than before. If it continued to fight like this, it would still be the one at a disadvantage. Chu Luyue coughed and glanced at Little Nine. She clearly saw that Red Demon was coming. Couldn't she be gentler? Little Nine looked at her innocently. It's Hong Yao's fault for not paying attention. How can I blame it? Besides, it was still busy trying to break through. Chu Luyue's eyelids twitched, and she had the urge to face bomb. Her intuition told her that the fight between these two wouldn't stop. She looked back again, and found that the Red Demon quickly pulled itself together and flew up again. But this time, it just stared at Little Nine from outside the barrier, and didn't continue to rush over. Suddenly, there seemed to be something moving in Chu Luyue's dantian. She was stunned. Only then did she realize that this movement seemed to be coming from the Black Pyramid. It was as if something inside was about to break free. The black barrier above seemed to have begun to shake. Chu Luyue's expression froze. Ever since she obtained this Black Pyramid, it had only produced an obvious movement in the Tianling God realm once. The rest of the time, there was no movement. That time, it opened the door to the Long Yuan sword. What was it this time? Boom! Little Nine crazily swallowed the surrounding heaven and earth energy, and the aura on its body continued to rise. The fluctuations were endless. The sound was earth-shattering. Everything within a radius of dozens of miles had been affected by this powerful energy. Crack! An extremely crisp sound was heard. Upon hearing that, Chu Luyue looked up and saw that the top of the barrier suddenly shattered. Numerous cracks instantly crawled all over the transparent barrier, like a spiderweb. This barrier is going to break. Retreat! Lei Laosi, who had been watching the situation closely, immediately yelled when he saw the situation. The man standing beside him moved swiftly. His movements were graceful, and in the blink of an eye, he had retreated quite a distance. At the same time, he waved his sleeves and brought Chang Wanzhou and the other two, who were still rooted to the ground, over. Chang Wanzhou reacted the fastest. He instinctively wanted to draw his sword, but shockingly realized that his body couldn't move at all. It wasn't until they were all brought to that man's side that the unknown restraining force on their bodies finally disappeared. The few of them had just stood still, and before they could say anything, they saw the transparent barrier shattering. With that tree as the center, a horrifying force crazily engulfed the surroundings. The ground was lifted up continuously. Broken wood and dust scattered everywhere. At the same time, the tail of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the sky finally started to transform. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:15. When Mu Qinghe heard Lei Laosi's shouts, she immediately retreated and summoned Hong Yao back at the same time. However, it seemed to be at odds with the 9-colored heavenly pheasant as it refused to move. Mu Qinghe frowned and pondered as she blocked the surrounding turbulence. Is Hong Yao acting like this because it's worried about Chu Luyue, or because of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Other than the one back then, there's almost no one else that can make Hong Yao so persistent. Could it be that it's hostile towards the entire 9-colored heavenly pheasant race? Mu Qinghe didn't dare to confirm her guess. From this position, she could vaguely see Chu Luyue's sleeves, but she couldn't see anything else. However, judging from the current situation, even though Chu Luyue was trapped by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant, he didn't seem to be in much danger for the time being. Jiang Yuqing and Elder Qiushi were both forced to retreat. Because Elder Qiushi was standing in front and was responsible for protecting Jiang Yuqing, he suffered quite a bit of injuries. However, Jiang Yuqing's current feelings were very complicated. Shang Guanwan went underground again. She clearly knew that it was that terrifying black swamp below. So why did she still go down? According to Jiang Yuqing's understanding of Shang Guanwan's character, since she did this, it must be to achieve one of her goals. But what exactly is it? Suddenly, Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Shang Guanwan is targeting those people trapped under Wan Yeshan? Once this thought popped up, it couldn't be dismissed. Jiang Yuqing clenched his fists and furrowed his brows. Shang Guanwan is definitely capable of doing such a thing. After all, she came here this time for this matter. But she actually gave up on her previous plan and chose this method. Recalling the thick and plump roots that looked like they were filled with blood, Jiang Yuqing's entire body turned numb. However, he was more worried. Jumping down in front of so many people, isn't she afraid of being exposed? She was really crazy. If Shang Guanwan knew what Jiang Yuqing was thinking at this time, she would definitely sneer at him. He wasn't the one whose Yuan meridian was crippled. He wasn't the one who was completely crippled. Of course he couldn't understand her feelings. Moreover, at that time, she had already been forced to the point where she had no way out. This was the only path she could take. Even if Shang Guanwan was given another 100 chances, she would still make the same choice. As for whether or not it would be discovered, she had done even more daring things. Let alone this? As long as the method was in place, nothing would be a problem. I wonder how the third princess is doing, Elder Qiushi said worriedly. Jiang Yuqing looked up at the sky. Chu Luyue seemed to be trapped by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. However, the strange thing was that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant was on the verge of failure just now. Its aura was in a frenzy, and it had almost lost its rationality. Under that kind of situation, it actually didn't take Chu Luyue's life. Moreover, after Chu Luyue left, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant somehow regained its strength. Now it was only one step away from success. Just now, what exactly happened? Boom, boom, boom. An even stronger wave came. Everyone looked up at the same time. A bright red flame suddenly appeared at the tail of the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. This light was like a knife that tore the dark sky apart. It was dazzling and eye-catching. A terrifying pressure that caused one's heart to palpitate spread out from its body. Everyone was dumbfounded as they tried to explain. That was a phoenix tail. Red-tailed red phoenix. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant had successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix. Red-tailed red phoenix. Isn't this the existence whose bloodline power is the closest to the crimson gold heavenly phoenix in the rumors? The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was one of the two great primordial divine beasts, along with the great void phoenix dragon. Rumor had it that there were many types below the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Among them, the red-tailed red phoenix was the most noble. The nine-colored heavenly pheasant wasn't considered the top 9th grade fiend in this lineage. Although everyone expected it to break through and become a phoenix, they didn't expect it to jump 3 grades and forcefully become a red-tailed red phoenix. Even Chu Luyue was stunned. She was full of expectations for Little Nine's breakthrough, but she had never imagined that it could become a red-tailed red phoenix. Back then, before she got into trouble, Little Nine already had signs of breaking through. However, at that time, the bloodline power in its body wasn't as dense as it was now. Otherwise, Chu Luyue wouldn't have mistaken Little Nine's identity after smelling that fragrance. What exactly had it experienced in the past 2 years? One had to know that the bloodline power in a fiend's body was basically fixed from birth. To strengthen it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Chu Luyue was sure that if it wasn't for the rich bloodline power in its body, it definitely wouldn't be able to break through and become a red-tailed red phoenix. Countless fragments of the barrier floated over, transforming into streams of light and entering Little Nine's body. It slowly closed its eyes. Chu Luyue's heart stirred. She suddenly looked up and frowned. The dark clouds in the sky hadn't dispersed yet. What was going on? Little Nine had already successfully broken through. Logically speaking, the clouds should have dispersed. Suddenly, a fluctuation came from Chuluyue's dantian. It was that black pyramid. Chuluyue immediately focused. Crack. A small crack suddenly appeared on that black seal. That crack was extremely small. If one didn't observe carefully, it would be impossible to notice it. However, Chuluyue's heart immediately jumped. The sealing power of this barrier was extremely strong. Back then, even Taizu couldn't open it. Now it actually cracked open by itself. A brilliant light shone out from within. Chuluyue held her breath. Then she felt as if something was flowing out from that crack. Chuluyue looked carefully, and was surprised to find that it was a ball of faint golden mist. After it floated out, before Chuluyue could see it clearly, that ball of golden mist quietly dissipated. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace. Chuluyue was confused. What was that? She still hadn't buzzed. A huge roar suddenly reverberated in her mind. Chuluyue hugged her head. She was in extreme pain. It was as if someone was holding an axe and madly chopping at her head, trying to split it open. Ah! Chuluyue cried out in pain. Almost at the same time, the feathers on Little Nine's head flashed with a brilliant golden color. Its wings suddenly flapped. Then, the golden light quickly disappeared. It sank into its crimson feathers. Its movements were extremely fast, and all of this happened too suddenly, so no one noticed it at all. Everyone's attention was attracted by Chuluyue's cry of surprise. Chuluyue hugged her head tightly with both hands. In an instant, countless images flashed through her mind. Finally, one image froze. It was still that cliff. It was still that octagonal pavilion. It was still that man in the black brocade robe. Chuluyue's heart suddenly jumped. She seemed to have a premonition. This time, the man turned his face to the side and chuckled in her direction. He was lazy and noble. You are come here. Digression. Ah, Khan is so painful. It's so slow. Ah. There's still 6 chapters left. Ah, I don't know if I can add more chapters. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Ah, mobile phone users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 716. His face seemed to be hidden in a cloud of fog, and she couldn't see it clearly. That voice also sounded familiar, as though she had heard it somewhere before. Chuluyue inexplicably believed that the you was calling her. Who is this man? Why is he calling my name? Moreover, it's in such a familiar tone. Chuluyue wanted to walk forward uncontrollably, but her body seemed to be trapped on the spot, and she couldn't move an inch. There was a distance between the two of them, and she couldn't get close to him. That man didn't seem to be in a hurry, and he even extended a hand, as though waiting for her to go over. He stood tall, and the mountain breeze blew his black clothes. He was like a devil's snare blooming in the dark night, but he was also floating like an immortal. Chuluyue opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but she couldn't say a single word. There seemed to be a transparent barrier between the two of them, and they couldn't get close to each other. You are. Chuluyue instinctively knew this man, and her chest was filled with an impulse to call out his name. It seemed that as long as she called out his name, she could remember who he was. However, Chuluyue couldn't call out his name. Her heart gradually became anxious. Suddenly, a golden ray of light floated past her eyes. Chuluyue's eyes instantly turned into a golden dazzle. She couldn't see anything clearly. In the next moment, it was as if something had violently tugged at her. Her body fell downwards. Bam! Everything in front of her dissipated with a loud bang. Thousands of miles away, in an elegant and unique attic, a figure was sitting by the window. He had changed back to black clothes today, and he looked a little cold. At this moment, there was a chessboard in front of him. Opposite him was 36 respected Elder Ming. His slender and fair fingers picked up a white chess piece, and when it was in mid-air, his movements suddenly paused. 36 respected Elder Ming raised his head and looked at the man opposite him strangely. Your Highness. He had always been decisive when playing chess, and he would never stop in the middle of a game. It seemed that he was thinking about something. 36 Respected Elder Ming was about to ask again, when he suddenly saw a golden flame ignite on his fingertip. The flames quickly condensed into half a rune in the air before quickly dissipating. Chi! The chess piece between his fingers instantly turned into a wisp of white smoke. It slowly drifted away. 36 Respected Elder Ming narrowed his eyes. His Highness actually used such a seal at this time. Your Highness, did something happen? Rongxiu shook his head, and his thin lips raised a light smile. Nothing. It was just that. She had opened the seal on the pyramid faster than he had expected. 36 Respected Elder Ming looked at his languid expression, the smile at the corner of his lips, and the faint pampering and pride in his eyes. He could already guess a little. It has something to do with the young princess consort. Rongxiu smiled, picked up another piece and put it down. Slap. Yes. She should be thinking about me, Rongxiu said calmly and confidently. 36 Respected Elder Ming instantly curled his lips in disdain. It was fine if he directly said that he was thinking about his wife, but he had to say that she was thinking about him. How shameless. Your Highness, your skin seems to be getting thicker, 36 Respected Elder Ming said impolitely. Rongxiu's smile deepened. He didn't mind him saying that, and only raised his eyebrows. I was just speaking the truth, but I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking about me? Chu Liyue suddenly woke up and gasped for air. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat, and her clothes were already drenched in sweat, sticking to her body. It was extremely uncomfortable. A soft touch came over. Chu Liyue looked up in a daze. It was little Nine who came over with a worried look in her eyes. She seemed to have woken up from a dream. That scene just now. It didn't seem like an illusion but a memory. Chu Liyue pursed her lips tightly, and a trace of panic appeared in her heart. This memory couldn't possibly belong to Chu Liyue's body. Then, could it be hers? But in the 20 years of her previous life, she had never had such a memory. Could it be that she had really forgotten something? Chu Liyue unconsciously clenched her fists. As the breeze blew, her body felt cold. When this scene first appeared, she only thought that it was an illusion. But this time, she could clearly feel that the entire scene had become much clearer. It was as if something that had been sealed for a long time was taken out, and the dust was wiped away, gradually revealing its original appearance. Chu Liyue rarely had such emotions. She faintly felt that she seemed to have missed out on something important, but she didn't even know it. What made her even more uneasy was that the man in black seemed to be someone very important to her. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and suppressed the chaotic emotions in her heart. She looked at the black pyramid in her dantian again, and found that the tiny crack on it was still there. But the faint glow that was emitted from it had disappeared. At a glance, there seemed to be nothing but darkness under the crack. The seal was indeed broken, but it wasn't completely opened. Chu Liyue tried to shake the seal, but found that it was futile. Girl, that crack was split open by the power of the heavenly Tao when you were contracting with this red-tailed phoenix. It won't be that easy for you to open it with your own strength. Taizu's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Liyue was shocked. Contract. Heavenly Tao. You still don't know? This red-tailed phoenix is already your contracted divine beast. When a 9th-grade magical beast breaks through to become a divine beast, the power of the heavenly Tao that it summons is often hidden in the 9th Tianlei. Just now, this little guy almost didn't make it through. It was only after contracting with you that it crossed this threshold, and the power of the heavenly Tao naturally divided a portion of it into your body. Chu Liyue's mind raced. Now that she had changed her body, she naturally needed to contract with little Nine again. Now that she thought about it, it should be when little Nine used its claws to pierce her neck. It inadvertently succeeded in contracting? Chu Liyue touched her neck. The wound wasn't big, and although little Nine had almost lost its mind and attacked her, but at the last moment, it seemed to have relied on its instincts to avoid all the fatal points. Now that the wound had coagulated, it would recover after resting for a while. At that time, she only wanted to summon little Nine back and help little Nine cross the 9th Tianlei. She didn't expect that by a freak combination of factors, she would directly contract with it. It could be seen that the fate between them couldn't be cut off no matter what. The thing in your body received the power of the heavenly Tao and became like this. It's a pity that the power of the seal is too strong, and it seems to have automatically repaired itself. Taizu's voice was somewhat regretful. He had thought that he could take advantage of this opportunity to completely remove the seal. Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "There will be a day when I will open this seal." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 717. Then, a red light flashed in front of her eyes, and little Nine's enormous figure rapidly changed and finally became the size of a palm. Its entire body was red, and its tail in particular was like a burning flame that was intense and intense. Its pair of round eyes were extremely gorgeous, like the most precious gemstone, dazzling and eye-catching. Chu Luiyue reached out her hand, and little Nine flew into her palm. She didn't blink at all, and her heart was filled with joy and admiration. Although she wasn't sure how little Nine escaped the pursuit back then, nor did she know how it transformed into Dumpling and found her. But these weren't the most important. It was still here and had returned to her side. That was enough. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and said in her heart, "Little Nine, I'm afraid I can't call you Little Nine anymore. Why don't I call you Dumpling?" The nine-colored heavenly pheasant's identity was already sensitive enough, and if she called it Little Nine again, it would really be too ostentatious. Anyway, she had already called it Dumpling for so long, and it had always been by her side using this name, so it was most suitable to continue calling it this way. Little Nine nodded seriously and rubbed its head against her palm gently. The furry touch and its extremely obedient appearance made Chu Luiyue's heart melt. She said softly, "Dumpling, I'll bring you home." When they saw that the enormous red-tailed phoenix in the sky became the size of a palm, everyone standing below was stunned. Then, when they saw it fly onto Chu Luiyue's shoulder, and the human and beast landed together, everyone was even more confused. In the end, when they saw Chu Luiyue patting that red-tailed phoenix's head dotingly, and the latter rubbing against her neck like a spoiled child, other than Lei Laosi and the other two who had been guarding, everyone else instantly felt bad. What's going on? Where's the majestic mythical beast? Where's the ferocious red-tailed phoenix? Why did it suddenly become such a tiny thing? Most importantly, it's so intimate with Chu Luiyue. Looking at Chu Luiyue standing in the middle, and the red lump on her shoulder, the surroundings fell into an eerie silence. A gust of wind blew past, and only the rustling of leaves could be heard. Chu Luiyue looked around and chuckled. "What's wrong with you guys?" This voice was like a stone falling into a calm lake, instantly stirring up countless waves. "Luyu's name. What's wrong with you?" Mu Hongyu widened her almond-shaped eyes as she asked in shock. "Isn't this a mythical beast? Why did it become so small? Also, why is it in you? After stuttering for a long while, Mu's of the heavenly pheasant. Chu Luiyue. "Oh, this. It's probably because it's this big when it's not in combat form. But I'm not very sure." Before Chu Luiyue could finish speaking, Dumpling nodded vigorously. "Of course. Otherwise, it would be so troublesome to be so big. It's still the most convenient to be with Master like this." Chu Luiyue turned to look at it and said seriously, "Oh, it seems like I guessed right. Look, even it said so. Everyone." "What did it say?" "No, that's not the key to the problem. Luyu, I am not asking about this." Mu Hongyu opened her mouth with difficulty. She looked conflicted. Yi Ranran took the initiative to help explain and whispered, "Luyu, what Hongyu wants to ask is, you and this red-tailed phoenix, what's going on? Wasn't it very fierce to you just now? Why is it now?" Everyone had clearly seen what had happened before. This red-tailed phoenix was very rude to Chu Luiyue in the beginning. It even seemed like it wanted to kill Chu Luiyue several times. Why did the human and beast become so close in the blink of an eye? Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. "Oh, you're asking about this," she smiled. Her eyes were curved, and they were as bright as the Milky Way. Because it's now my contracted magical beast. Because it's now my contracted magical beast? Everyone's expression turned sluggish for a moment. What did you say? The one who spoke this time was not Mu Hongyu, nor was it Yi Ranran. It was actually Jiang Yucheng. After being stunned for a moment, his heart was filled with shock, and he almost blurted out this sentence. Chu Luiyue glanced at him indifferently with a faint smile. Didn't I say it clearly enough just now? I said this red-tailed red phoenix is my magical beast now. Her tone was so casual, as if she was talking about an insignificant matter. But in everyone's ears, it was like thunder. Red-tailed phoenix. Such a divine beast had actually contracted with Chu Luiyue? Elder Qiushi, who was beside him, finally came back to his senses. He stared blankly at the small ball on Chu Luiyue's shoulder, and his old face trembled violently. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. There were so many people present, so why was it Chu Luiyue's turn? The red-tailed phoenix is a divine beast. How could it take a fancy to you? Although these words were unpleasant, they were very straightforward, and they also asked the same question in everyone's hearts. If the red-tailed phoenix really wanted to find a human to contract, why did it choose Chu Luiyue among so many people? Chu Luiyue raised her chin slightly, revealing the scratch on her neck. At this moment, there were still traces of blood on it. Just now Dumpling was swallowed by it, so I wanted to save Dumpling. But I didn't expect that an accident would happen in the middle. The red-tailed phoenix's claws pierced my neck, and I inexplicably contracted with it. I also just found out about it. Chu Luiyue explained in a sincere tone, and her expression was somewhat innocent. My magical beast was swallowed by it, so I could only use it to repay my debt. Everyone was speechless. The divine beast that millions of people yearned for. And you just made a contract with it like you had seen a ghost, and took it for yourself? You even used a third-grade blood ferret to exchange for a divine beast. Everyone fell into a strange dead silence again. There was no choice, it was too shocking. It was the first time they saw a divine beast, and before they could see it clearly, Chu Luiyue had already beaten them to it. Most importantly, the whole thing was too coincidental. There was no room for anyone to interrupt. Everyone saw with their own eyes that Chu Luiyue's blood ferret was indeed swallowed by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant at that time. It was reasonable for Chu Luiyue to want to save it. Moreover, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant should have planned to kill her as well. Otherwise, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have that scratch on her neck. If it was under normal circumstances, it wouldn't matter if it killed 1 or 100 people. But the key was that it was breaking through at that time. In the end, it contracted with it just like that. Mu Hongyu gave her a thumbs up in admiration. Yi Ranran was also excited. Luyu, you're amazing. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled very modestly. Not at all. I was just a little lucky. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 718. Wasn't it because his luck was a little better? How could she have the nerve to say such a thing? Was this a good point? Her luck was clearly heaven-defying. How could she let others live? Elder Qiushi almost couldn't catch his breath, and his face turned red. He pointed at Chu Luiyue, his hands trembling, and his lips trembling for a long time. But he couldn't say a word. What could he say? What else could he say? Everything happened in front of everyone, and he couldn't even slander her. That red-tailed phoenix had already contracted with her. So what else could he do? Chu Luiyue looked at him with concern and asked, Elder Qiushi, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Elder Qiushi retracted his hand, waved his sleeves fiercely, and turned his head away. Out of sight, out of mind. Chu Luiyue sneered in her heart. Of course, she could see through Elder Qiushi's thoughts. It was nothing more than that he had some ulterior motives for Dumpling. For this reason, he didn't even care about Shangguan. But why didn't he think about how he was qualified? After so many years, his greedy nature still hadn't changed at all. A green shadow suddenly flew over. Chu Luiyue took a closer look. Red Demon? She was still a little worried when Red Demon hit the barrier just now. But judging from its current appearance, well, there shouldn't be any problem. Red Demon glared at Dumpling angrily. Dumpling turned around and didn't look at it. She had seen it for so many years. What was there to see? Red Demon was so angry that its small body almost turned into a ball. With a chi-la sound, its body burned with green flames. It had felt that something was wrong earlier, and now it seemed that its guess was right. It was Red Demon. To think that it had been sad for a long time back then. After all this time, Red Demon was fine. It even broke through to a divine beast. Red Demon thought that it wasn't even a 9th grade magical beast now. It was one level lower than Red Demon, and it was extremely angry. As it was angry, it began to cry. It definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Red Demon in the future. Thinking of this, Hong Yao was filled with sorrow, and bean-sized tears fell down. It hurriedly turned around and wiped the tears away with its wings. However, his tears flowed endlessly like a broken dam, drenching half of his wings. It had bullied it many times in the past, and it would definitely get it back in the future. Chu Luiyue felt both amused and distressed. Just as he was about to walk over, he paused and looked at Mu Qinghe helplessly. Vice Admiral Mu, this. Mu Qinghe also felt a headache coming on. He could control Hong Yao's willful temper, but at times like this, even he was helpless. Hong Yao, come back! Mu Qinghe shouted. Hong Yao didn't want to move, but thinking that there were so many people watching, she had to go back sobbing. Mu Qinghe frowned and looked at it. You weren't injured just now, so why are you crying? Hong Yao glared at him and turned its head away. What do you know? Mu Qinghe, who was despised for no reason, was speechless. You are Miss Chu Luiyue, right? The man at the side who hadn't spoken finally spoke. His expression was calm, and there was a smile on his lips, as if he wasn't shocked by this incident. Chu Luiyue looked at him, and her eyes flickered. She nodded. May I know who you are? Qini. His long and narrow eyes narrowed as he glanced at Chu Luiyue and the red-tailed phoenix on her shoulder and smiled. Miss Chu, you're really lucky. We've been waiting for this 9-colored heavenly pheasant for a long time, but we didn't expect it to choose you in the end. Chu Luiyue coughed. I'm really sorry. It's nothing. It's not unreasonable for fate to be decided by the heavens. There are so many people here, but it still made a contract with Ms. Chu. This shows that some things are really destined, said Qin Yi with a faint smile. He spoke slowly and calmly, making one feel as if they were bathed in the spring breeze. Chu Luiyue revealed a grateful expression. Thank you, Big Brother Qin and Big Brother Lei, for your understanding. Luiyue is very grateful. Lei Laoxi's eyes twitched harshly, and his legs turned to jelly as he almost knelt down. Damn it. It's fine if you want to act, but I really can't afford to be called Big Brother Lei. He hurriedly glanced at Qin Yi at the side, but saw that his big brother still looked very calm. Miss Chu, you're too polite. Lei Laoxi's respect for his big brother rose spontaneously. Her Highness calls you Big Brother, but you can really handle it, Chu Luiyue said very sincerely. I owe the two of you a favor regarding the legendary fiend. I'll definitely think of a way to compensate the two of you in the future. How about that? Lei Laoxi couldn't help it. No need. It originally coughed. Since it chose you in the first place, we can only be envious of it. If you weren't around, it might have just left on its own. It wouldn't have made a contract with a human. Chu Luiyue glanced at Lei Laoxi with a smile in her eyes. Even though these two people's appearances and auras are different from before, their temperaments haven't changed at all. She thanked the two of them once more and didn't say anything else. Where's the third princess? She scanned her surroundings and finally landed on the spot where Sheng Guanwan disappeared. That deep pit had been filled up with messy tree roots and soil at some point in time. When she asked this, everyone then remembered that Sheng Guanwan had already disappeared for quite some time. Because the red-tailed phoenix caused too much of a commotion just now, they didn't have time to think about Sheng Guanwan's situation. Everyone quietened down and didn't know how to continue the conversation. Could it be that we have to go down and find Sheng Guanwan? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at Jiang Yuqing. Eldest young master Jiang. The third princess has been missing for so long. Aren't you worried at all? Jiang Yuqing was about to speak when the ground suddenly shook. Red miasma floated over from all directions. The surrounding trees started to wither at a visible speed. The gigantic Wan Yeshan in the middle suddenly raised several tree roots. Qin Yi's expression turned cold. Someone touched the mother tree's seal. Chu Luiyue was shocked. There's actually a seal on this tree? Qin Yi stared at the Wan Yeshan that looked like it was about to go crazy, and his face froze. Hurry and retreat. The moment he said that, cries and wails suddenly came from the surrounding forest. At that moment, it seemed like thousands of people were crying in pain. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m., speaking of which, should I update 1 chapter a day, or should I save 20 chapters and update them all at once? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IG. Chapter 719. The chilly wind blew, and the sorrowful cries sounded as if they were in hell. This bone-chilling sound made one's hair stand on end, and it even chilled one to the bone. Everyone retreated in unison. More and more red miasma started surging toward them. The surrounding trees were quickly withering. Only the incomparably thick mother tree in the middle did not show any signs of withering. Instead, it seemed to have been nourished by something. Every leaf seemed to have become even more emerald green. Every branch also became taller and straighter. The most shocking thing was that it seemed to be growing slowly and steadily in the midst of the red miasma. What's going on? Mu Hongyu hugged the golden mane bear cub in her arms nervously and looked at Chu Luiyue. Luyu, the miasma is coming over. This situation is exactly the same as what we saw when we turned around. Could it be that we're also going to chop? Qin Yi suddenly waved his sleeves, and a faint green barrier instantly enveloped the few of them. The red miasma drifted over, but when it came into contact with the green barrier, it quickly retreated, as if it had encountered something terrifying. However, Qin Yi's barrier only surrounded the few people near him, perhaps because Elder Qiushi, Jiang Yuqing, and Mu Qinghe were standing further away. They weren't protected by the barrier. Seeing that Qin Yi's barrier easily blocked off the red miasma, Elder Qiushi immediately said, This, young Master Qin, there's still us. This red miasma doesn't look easy to deal with. If Qin Yi can take the initiative to help, we can save a lot of energy. Qin Yi glanced at him lightly and said in a seemingly smiling manner, My apologies. My abilities are limited, and helping these few people is already my limit. Elder Qiushi was stunned. Hey you. Elder Qiushi, big brother Qin, and we just met by chance. And we're already very grateful that he helped us. How can you order him to do anything? Chu Luiyue lightly interrupted Elder Qiushi's words and smiled very sincerely. Besides, don't you see that I'm also alone? Qin Yi's barrier actually only enveloped Mu Hongyu, and the other two, Lei Laosi and her, weren't inside. Chu Luiyue set up a barrier around himself, and the miasma drifted far away. Chu Luiyue felt slightly relieved. Dumpling rubbed its cheek, and its gem-like eyes were dazzling. Chu Luiyue blinked and immediately understood what Dumpling meant. Does this mean that with it around, the miasma won't hurt me? Lei Laosi raised his hammer and hammered the ground harshly. A transparent barrier instantly appeared. It enveloped him. Several streaks of icy blue lightning danced on it, crackling loudly. Lei Laosi looked at Elder Qiushi in disdain. In this mystic forest, if you don't have the ability, you can't rely on anyone. In the end, only death awaited. Elder Qiushi's expression was ugly. Isn't this pointing at my nose and scolding me for being useless? Just as he was about to speak, Jiang Yuqing stopped him with a stern gaze. It was already embarrassing enough just now. Do you think it's not enough? Elder Qiushi could only shut his mouth indignantly. Mu Qinghe took out a jade bottle. Eldest young master, the pill inside is the antidote for the miasma. If the miasma accidentally invades your body, you just have to take this pill. As she spoke, she handed one to Jiang Yuqing and another to Elder Qiushi. Elder Qiushi couldn't wait to take the elixir away. Jiang Yuqing glanced at the pill in his hand. At the start, you didn't seem to have mentioned this. Mu Qinghe's expression was calm. Because the last general also didn't expect the poison of the miasma to become so scary. When we came here previously, we could set up a barrier to block most of the miasma outside. But now, we have no choice but to use the antidote. The last general also just thought of this. Also, there's only one bottle of antidote. Jiang Yuqing looked at him. Mu Qinghe had always been serious and cautious in doing things. It was absolutely impossible for her to only think of this pill now. Moreover, even if the quantity was small, she could have given one to Sheng Guanwan first. After all, her identity was the most important in this group of people. But Mu Qinghe didn't do so. That was clearly showing that she didn't want to give it to her. Mu Qinghe's expression was indifferent, and she looked very magnanimous. Jiang Yuqing didn't say much. Sheng Guanwan had always disliked Mu Qinghe. Didn't Mu Qinghe feel the same way about her? Moreover, Sheng Guanwan had many tricks up her sleeve, so she didn't need these things. Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Luiyue again, and handed over the bottle expressionlessly. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't expect Mu Qinghe to be willing to give him such a precious antidote. Even though she was the one who gave it to him, after refining it. Chu Luiyue smiled very politely. Before he said anything, he heard Mu Qinghe say, "Ms. Chu, please return the black shield that was snatched away by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. So she's here to ask for something." Chu Luiyue's expression became a little dull. When Sheng Guanwan jumped down, he didn't think of a way to save her. Instead, he was more concerned about this black shield. Interesting. Her fan-like eyelashes trembled slightly. When she looked up, her eyes were already calm. "Thank you for your kind intentions, Vice Admiral Mu. However, I have the red-tailed phoenix beside me, so I don't really need this antidote. You should keep it for yourself. As for that black shield, I'll naturally return it to the third princess when I find her." Mu Qinghe pursed his lips. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt that the current Chu Luiyue seemed to be a little different from the Chu Luiyue he saw in country, Yao Chen at the start. The previous Chu Luiyue was polite, but also a little timid. However, the current her already dared to reject him directly. That's right. After all, she's contracted with a legendary fiend. She's definitely different from before. Mu Qinghe nodded and swallowed a pill before keeping the jade bottle. "Look, that miasma seems to be surging towards that mother tree," Yi Ranran exclaimed. When the crowd heard that, they all looked over and indeed saw that the miasma was slowly, but firmly floating towards the tree in the middle. Its branches and leaves rustled as if it was swallowing the miasma. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and looked at Qin Yi. "Big brother Qin, is this related to the seal on the mother tree that you mentioned previously?" Qin Yi nodded. "The mystic forest is filled with miasma every day, but it's usually in the periphery and has never drifted to the center. Actually, it wasn't like it had never happened before. More than a year ago, when they first arrived here, they coincidentally saw the same scene. However, at that time, the seal had just cracked open, and the 9-colored heavenly pheasant chose to rest on this tree. Its existence mended that crack, and was equivalent to adding a second layer of strength to the seal. Hence, from the time it hibernated here, nothing like this had happened in the mystic forest. Now that it had left, the seal would naturally be easily destroyed. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 720. That one Yes Han was still growing non-stop. And a few tree roots seemed to be unable to hold back, as they pulled out from the ground and flew up. They danced wildly with the wind. The tree roots, which looked like they were filled with blood, swung wildly, and emitted a frightening pressure. A thick, suffocating smell of blood spread out from within. It was also mixed with the smell of all sorts of rotting things. It was nauseating. Even though they were separated by a barrier, everyone could still feel it, and their expressions changed one after another. What exactly is down there? The thing inside those tree roots can't really be human blood, right? Yi Ranran couldn't help but mutter softly. Otherwise, there's really no way to explain this bloody smell. But if that's really the case, it's too chilling. Who knows whose blood this is? Jiang Yuqing and the rest didn't say anything. They were all dragged down before, so they naturally knew what was down there. Qin Yi said, "We can't stay here any longer. We have to leave immediately." As he spoke, He glanced at Chu Luiyue without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue didn't turn back, but he also knew what Qini meant, so he nodded and agreed. That's right. This tree situation is very strange. If we stay here any longer, who knows what will happen? With that, she lifted her leg, intending to retreat again. However, Elder Qiushi immediately spoke up. We can't leave. The third princess is still under that tree. If we leave just like that, what will happen to the third princess? Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. For such a long time just now, he didn't think about this matter at all. Now that dumpling belongs to me, and I don't have any benefits to reap, he suddenly thought of it. Since Elder Qiushi cares so much, why don't you go down and take a look yourself? Elder Qiushi quickened his pace, rushed to Chu Luiyue and said coldly, this red-tailed phoenix has been staying on this mother tree all this while. Now that it's become your fiend, it's naturally the most suitable for you to go down. Didn't you just say that with it around, this miasma isn't a problem for you? Chu Luiyue knew that Elder Qiushi was shameless, but he didn't expect him to be so shameless as to say such words without batting an eyelid. Looking at his self-righteous expression, Chu Luiyue was so angry that he laughed. What Elder Qiushi means is that you want me, the person with the lowest cultivation level here, to search for the third princess's whereabouts by myself. Aren't you thinking too highly of me? However, Elder Qiushi refused to give up. This divine beast is already yours. If you don't go, who will? As expected, he's still holding a grudge about Dumpling. Chu Luiyue was well aware of the principle of treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Unfortunately, Dumpling was in an emergency at the time, and had no way to avoid these people. It wouldn't be long before this matter would spread like wildfire. Chu Luiyue knew that Dumpling's existence would cause a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect it to start now. Elder Qiushi, actually, I'm also very worried about the third princess's whereabouts. It's not a problem for me to take the lead, but if we all go together, we'll have a better chance. What do you think? Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered to refuse, and directly agreed to this matter. In fact, even if Elder Qiushi didn't mention it, she would still look for Sheng Guanwan. At that time, she saw clearly that Sheng Guanwan chose to jump down herself. It would be strange if there wasn't something fishy about this. Now that she was willing to look for her, Sheng Guanwan probably didn't want to be found. Since they wanted her to make a move, then she would inevitably drag the rest of the people down with her. Elder Qiushi's expression changed slightly. He originally planned to let Chu Luiyue go down by herself, but he couldn't refute her words. Chu Luiyue looked at Jiang Yuqing and said with a smile, Young Master Qiushi is most worried about the third princess. Eldest young Master Jiang should be most worried about third princess. I think he will definitely go with me, right? Jiang Yuqing's face was a little cold. I don't want to go down at all. After all, I know what it's like down there. Also, I can feel that there's something wrong with my body. Even though I tried my best to regulate my breathing, and barely recovered a little, my internal and external injuries haven't completely healed. If I encounter any danger again, however, he couldn't say no in front of so many people. Of course, Jiang Yuqing's voice was so cold that it seemed to have frozen over. This isn't appropriate. Qini suddenly spoke up with a disapproving expression. This mother tree's seal has already been broken, and nobody knows what kind of danger there will be. Even old 4, and I don't dare to fight head-on. If you go down now, you'll just be courting death. By then, not only will you not be able to find her, but you'll also lose your lives. Chu Luiyue's brows moved slightly. She knew that Qin Yi was against her going down. However, she had to go this time. Big brother Qin, we appreciate your good intentions. However, the third princess's whereabouts are unknown, and she's in danger. We can't just stand by and do nothing. Please take care of my friends. Mu Hongyu anxiously said. Lu Yu, what do you mean by this? You don't want us to go together? Upon hearing that, Chang Wanzhou didn't say anything, and just walked straight toward Chu Luiyue. When he reached the green barrier, he held the cloud sky copper sword tightly, and glanced at Qin Yi. If she goes, I'll go too. Even though Qin Yi was also very worried, he still couldn't help but laugh when he saw Chang Wanzhou like this. Am I the only one who's worried about her? If Chu Luiyue insists on going, Old 4 and I definitely won't stay outside. Boom. At this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from behind the crowd. They turned around and saw that the ground in the distance had suddenly collapsed. Countless withered trees fell down. A gigantic ravine instantly appeared. Also, the area of this collapse was still spreading. Very quickly, the same scene started happening in other directions. Uneasiness surged in Chu Liyue's heart as he tipped his toes and flew up. When he saw the scene below clearly, even Chu Liyue couldn't help but be shocked. The ground collapsed, and a ring-shaped ravine appeared with the mother tree as the center. The most important thing was that the area of the collapse actually started spreading outward. It was like an invisible wave that surged up continuously. The entire mystic forest actually started collapsing. The previously lush forest was now shrouded by the miasma and completely turned into a withered forest. The entire sky became dark once again. This time, it was different from the heaven and earth phenomenon that was caused when the nine-colored heavenly pheasant was about to break through. The entire place exuded a sinister and strange aura. Chu Liyue then looked at the mother tree in the middle. Amidst the raging winds, all the trees were withering and being swallowed. Only this one was safe and sound, and was even growing continuously. As Chu Liyue looked at the vibrant green leaves, a guess suddenly flashed across his mind. Could it be that this mother tree is swallowing the other tree's strength? This thought made Chu Liyue feel a chill in his heart. If I didn't guess wrongly, there should be a lot of people trapped under those trees like Jiang Yuqing, right? This current situation, Shangguanwan is under this mother tree. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 721. A white light flashed across Chu Liyue's mind. She already knew that Shangguanwan must have a motive for purposely bringing so many people to the mystic forest. However, it was only now that Chu Liyue finally understood what she wanted to do. She wanted to use these people's strength to recover her Yuan Meridian and abilities. Many of the people who came had Daijing Yuan Meridians, especially the disciples from the various clans. Almost all of them had Daijing Yuan Meridians. After all, they were all the most outstanding seedlings selected from the various clans. Wanzheng competition. So this is what she's doing. She can't recover her Yuan Meridian, so she's targeting other people's Yuan Meridians? Although it sounded creepy, if this conjecture was true, then many of the things that had happened before had a reasonable explanation. Chu Liyue was horrified. She was the clearest about how vicious Shangguanwan was. However, she never expected that Shangguanwan would actually dare to do this. How many talented cultivators is she going to attack? She actually dared to. For a moment, many emotions surged in Chu Liyue's heart, and she didn't know what to say. Shangguanwan's Yuan Meridian was damaged by the fire in her Tianjing Yuan Meridian back then. This kind of injury was basically unrecoverable. This was because the power of the Tianjing Yuan Meridian was simply too strong. Even Chu Liyue herself couldn't think of a way to help Shangguanwan reconstruct her Yuan Meridian. However, since she did this, it meant that she definitely had a way. Even if it was such a despicable and sinister method. Lu Yu? What's wrong? Yi Ranran looked up slightly and asked worriedly. The expression on Liu Yue's face doesn't seem right. This sound made Chu Liyue return to her senses. She took a deep breath and landed back on the ground. Everyone turned to look at him. Chu Liyue said in a low voice, "We can't leave. I'm afraid we can't leave." A few creases appeared on Qin Yi's forehead. The entire mystic forest is collapsing, except where we are. At the same time underground, after Shangguanwan jumped down, after falling for a long time, she finally landed in the swamp again. She took out a water pearl, and its faint glow illuminated the surroundings. Because she had been here once before, Shangguanwan wasn't afraid or worried this time. Instead, she was a little excited. She looked around and her gaze suddenly froze. Not far away, there was something emitting a dark green fluorescent light. That light looked a little cold and strange. Shangguanwan hesitated for a while, but still decided to approach. After getting closer, Shang Guanwan was surprised to find that there was a platform in the middle of the black swamp. The surrounding swamp surged, but there was one platform that remained unmoved. As for that dark green light, it was hanging above the platform. Suddenly, Shang Guanwan seemed to have stepped on something. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked down and pulled out one of her legs. Below, a head was surging up along with the swamp. That's what I stepped on just now. Most importantly, this head wasn't made of white bones. It was a human head that hadn't had time to rot. It was a pale face with bulging eyes and deeply sunken cheeks. It looked like it died with a grievance. Shang Guanwan felt disgusted and directly stepped on it again. When that thing was submerged by the black swamp again, Shang Guanwan patted her chest, closed her eyes, and let out a long sigh. Sure enough, the swamp below was flowing. When I dealt with this person just now, he seemed to be quite far away from here. I didn't expect to meet him again. Unlucky. Shang Guanwan quickly left that place and ran forward. Very quickly, she reached the stairs at the edge of the platform. There weren't any barriers here, so she could easily come up. Shang Guanwan shook off all the dirt on her body before she looked at the ball of green fire again. It was really just a ball of fire. It was only the size of a palm and was quietly floating in the air. Shang Guanwan was a little puzzled. What is this? Judging from its position, this thing should be directly below the mother tree. Suddenly, a tree root swung over from another direction. Shang Guanwan was shocked and quickly bent down. However, the target of the tree root wasn't her, but the ball of fire. It flew over quickly, but stopped in front of the ball of fire. A slender flame flew up and gently touched the tree root. The power contained in the tree root was continuously poured into the ball of fire. After a while, the tree root disappeared again, and the ball of fire was bigger than before. Shang Guanwan's heart was beating wildly. So, the power that was devoured was finally poured into this. If I take this ball of fire for myself, then wouldn't that power become mine? Thinking of this, her eyes lit up, and she almost couldn't control the excitement in her heart. She took out a blood-red pill and quickly swallowed it. A moment later, the incomplete yuan meridian in her body seemed to have been stimulated by some kind of power and became alive again. The skin on her entire body had turned red. Black lines were faintly discernible. It looked very strange. She raised her foot and was about to step forward when she suddenly stopped. This thing might be dangerous. Shang Guanwan's heart stirred and suddenly took out a set of armor. It was the pure gold sacred armor. She quickly put it on and took a step forward with a peace of mind. Digression. I feel like I'm writing a ghost story facepalm. 6 o'clock. Since everyone said that they want to update at 20, then let's do it together. Every monthly ticket is a ladder to explosive updates. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 722. Taking a step forward, Shang Guanwan clenched her fists nervously. After waiting for a while, nothing unexpected happened. Everything in the surroundings was still the same as before. Shang Guanwan heaved a sigh of relief in her heart and continued to walk up. Wearing the pure gold sacred armor gave her more confidence in her heart. In the quiet and dark space, only the sound of the black mud and her own footsteps could be heard. Shang Guanwan held her breath. Another tree root floated over. This time, Shang Guanwan had experience. She just stood there and waited. As expected, the tree root flew directly in front of the ball of fire. The faint green flame lightly twirled around it in a small circle. The power contained in it was quickly transferred into the ball of fire. Shang Guanwan waited at the side. Soon the second tree root also left. That ball of fire had already become twice as big as before. Shang Guanwan thought to herself. The power contained in this tree root seemed to be more abundant than expected. She waited for a moment and walked forward again. There was no cover around that ball of fire. When she was 3 steps away from that ball of fire, Shang Guanwan was surprised to see that it was actually a burning rune. It was just that this rune looked very unfamiliar. Who left it here? Shang Guanwan's heart was beating wildly. Then, she stretched out her hand and slowly reached out towards that ball of fire. Chi! Just as her hand approached, that ball of fire suddenly rose up. It burned her hand fiercely. Hiss! Shang Guanwan felt the pain and hurriedly drew her hand back. This thing didn't look special, but the temperature was extremely high. Shang Guanwan lowered her head to take a look and realized that only half of her palm was burned. Because the pure gold sacred armor only covered half of her palm. The parts that were protected by the armor were intact, but the parts that were exposed were directly burned with huge blood blisters. It looked very horrifying. While Shang Guanwan was surprised, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. So the power of this pure gold holy armor is really so powerful. She hadn't even used it yet. She was just wearing it, but its defensive power was already so strong. He really didn't know how strong this pure gold armor would be after it was fully awakened. Shang Guanwan licked her lips, a trace of greed and excitement flashing in her eyes. She thought for a moment and decided to use both hands at the same time. His wrist was wrapped tightly by the pure gold armor. As such, as long as they didn't touch his exposed skin, he didn't have to worry about anything. Shang Guanwan slowly reached out and hugged the ball of fire from the outside. From time to time, sparks would fly in all directions, but because they all landed on the pure gold sacred armor, Shang Guanwan wasn't affected at all. Her eyes were fixed on the ball of green fire as she approached it bit by bit. Boom! All of a sudden the flame exploded. Shang Guanwan turned pale with fright. Just as she was about to retreat, she found that the ball of fire suddenly flew towards her. Poof! That flame directly hit the position of her heart. Shang Guanwan only felt as though there was a huge rock pressing on her chest, so heavy that she almost couldn't breathe. But this feeling disappeared in an instant. In an instant, it was as though something had forcefully passed through her chest and entered her heart. A scorching burning sensation came from her heart. Shang Guanwan was extremely flustered. She didn't expect that ball of fire to enter her heart directly. With such a temperature, it wouldn't take long before her entire body would be burned to ashes. The painful burning sensation reminded her of that night in the royal family's ancestral hall. She had once thought that that was the most painful day of her life, but she didn't expect that this thing was also so torturous. Ah! Shang Guanwan cried out in pain and fell onto the ground. She covered the position of her heart tightly with both hands, wanting to chase that ball of fire out. But immediately, she felt that the thing had started to move. There was an intense pain in her abdomen. Shang Guanwan's originally blood-red face turned slightly pale. The pain was really unbearable. She could only use both hands to hold the ground tightly and hit her head on the ground, wanting to faint and forget this pain. Clang! A dull sound was heard. However, she had forgotten that she was still wearing the pure gold sacred armor, and her forehead was also protected. She couldn't even torture herself. But she didn't dare to really take off the pure gold sacred armor, and could only endure it in the end. She didn't notice that during this process, the strange black patterns on her body were also undergoing subtle changes. After a long and incomparably torturous period, that terrifying pain finally lessened by a lot. Shang Guanwan curled up on the ground, her entire body covered in cold sweat. Because her hands were scratching the ground with force, her hands were dripping with blood, and her bones could be seen. Her lips were also bitten by herself. The blood was messy and unrecognizable. She panted heavily, and finally found her reason with great difficulty. The pain on her body reminded her she was still alive. Shang Guanwan regained her senses, and immediately began to check her body. In the end, she was stunned on the spot. Because that ball of fire actually landed in her dantian in the end. She was connected to the 5 treasures, so that ball of fire could spread from the flames to her dantian. Shang Guanwan stared in a daze for a while before she discovered that that thing no longer had the appearance of a runic seal. Instead, it had completely turned into a fireball. It quietly floated in the center of her dantian, and that burning pain seemed to gradually dissipate. Ever since Shang Guanwan's Yuan Meridian was destroyed, her core of essence was also damaged. Right now, the place where this dark green fireball was at was where her core of essence should be. A majestic energy suddenly surged out from that fireball and spread to her limbs and bones. The strange patterns on Shang Guanwan's body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Not long later, those patterns seeped into her skin again. Everything happened too quickly. Shang Guanwan didn't even have time to react before she felt that the Yuan meridian in her body was completely wrapped in a layer of dark green light. Then a rich energy flowed out from within. Shang Guanwan suddenly trembled violently. My Yuan meridian has been restored. As if to confirm her guess, another wave of energy surged out from the fireball in her dantian and spread along the dark green Yuan meridian. Shang Guanwan almost couldn't believe what was happening. She confirmed it again and tried again. When she discovered that the Yuan meridian that was wrapped in the dark green light could smoothly circulate the energy in her body, Shang Guanwan was finally sure that her Yuan meridian had indeed been restored. The black patterns on her body had all dissipated, leaving only the space between her eyebrows. There was a final mark that looked like a strange black runic seal. At this moment, something suddenly appeared in her mind. She closed her eyes and carefully sensed it. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise. She could actually sense the location of everyone under Wan Yeshan's control in the mystic forest. As long as she wanted to, she could devour any of their energy. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 723. Upon closer inspection, she could even identify the identities of those people. There was the Black Cavalry and disciples from various sects. In addition, there were a few people that she did not recognize. They must have been swallowed after trespassing into the mystic forest. Shang Guanwan never expected that this thing would bring her such a big surprise. Previously, she thought that she would choose a portion of these people to take action after arriving at the mystic forest. If something happened to everyone, it would inevitably arouse suspicion from outsiders. In addition, she had to make sure that she would not be discovered before she could take action. For example, when she was trapped in the enclosed space with more than 10 people, everyone would think that those people were swallowed by the black swamp and would not associate it with her. After all, the mystic forest was full of dangers, and it was normal to encounter accidental deaths. With these conditions added together, the range of her actions was very small. But now it was different. As long as she wanted, she could quietly get rid of all these people. Shang Guanwan checked the situation in her body again. The fireball in her dantian stopped after 2 streams of power surged out. Shang Guanwan waited for a while, but it did not move again. She thought for a while, and guessed that these 2 streams of power might have been swallowed by the 2 tree roots just now. And these were only enough to repair 1/10 of her Yuan meridian. If she wanted to completely recover, she had to continue. And these trapped people added together, it should be enough, right? When she thought that her Yuan meridian could be successfully recovered, Shang Guanwan was so excited that her body trembled slightly. God knows how long she had waited for this day. No one would know that she was the one who did all this. Therefore, she could do it without worry. Perhaps she could even take this opportunity to raise her level. Shang Guanwan was extremely excited. Her eyes were scarlet as she began to choose among these people. First, she had to choose someone with a high-level Yuan meridian. This way, she would be able to convert all the power contained in their Yuan meridian into her own. It would also have the best effect on the recovery of her Yuan meridian. Thinking of this, a figure suddenly appeared in Shang Guanwan's mind. Right. Where's Chu Luiyue? Her Yuan meridian was definitely one of the best among these people, right? Unfortunately, Shang Guanwan couldn't find Chu Luiyue even after looking around. It must have not been devoured by Wan Yeshan yet. Shang Guanwan was a little unwilling. She had disliked Chu Luiyue for a long time. If she could get rid of Chu Luiyue at the same time, it would be perfect. Forget it. Recovering my Yuan meridian is more important, Shang Guanwan thought. In the distance, a certain sect disciple who had been trapped was about to break free. But the tree roots on his body suddenly sped up. It pierced straight into his chest. Ah! A short and hurried cry came from his throat, but it soon stopped abruptly. This was because the power in his body had been forcefully taken away by the roots. In the blink of an eye, his life was taken. He didn't even have time to react before he lost all signs of life. His eyes were wide open, his cheeks were sunken, and his entire body was curled up into a small ball. It was very strange. The same scene played out one after another in this dark space. The entire mystic forest was collapsing. This news gave everyone a huge shock. Even Qin Yi's expression turned serious. When Chu Liyue saw his expression, he knew that they probably hadn't experienced such a situation before. Things were more troublesome than expected. Why did the mystic forest suddenly collapse? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. Chu Liyue pointed at Wan Yeshan in the middle. Perhaps it's like what Big Brother Qin said before. It's because someone touched the seal. Jiang Yuqing fell silent. If we're talking about who's most likely to do this, Shengguan Wan is the most likely. After all, I went down from here just now. Besides, Jiang Yuqing knew what I was planning to do this time. Since that's the case, it seems like we have to go down this time. As Chu Liyue spoke, he walked forward. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed. I'll take the lead. Chu Liyue turned around and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, don't worry. Since I've already contracted the red-tailed phoenix, it should be the safest. Lei Laosi immediately said. How can that do? How can I let a young lady like you take the lead? Although Her Highness has a legendary fiend now, she's still a stage 5 warrior after all. Besides, Big Brother and I have been here for quite a long time, so we roughly know how to go down. I'm also very efficient. Lei Laosi finally thought of a reasonable reason. Since he had already said so much, it would be a little strange if he continued to push it away. Chu Liyue followed his advice and took a step back. Then, I'll have to trouble Big Brother Lei. Lei Laosi's hands trembled again. He really couldn't take Her Highness calling him Big Brother again and again. Lei Laosi hurriedly rushed to the front and arrived at the position where Shengguan Wan jumped down. This place was basically sealed off now. He held the hammer tightly with both hands, and his expression became serious and solemn. Everyone had already followed over one after another. Since they couldn't escape outside, the safest plan now was to stay together. Lei Laosi circulated the force in his body, and the aura around him surged crazily. Streaks of icy blue lightning swam around the hammer. A vast amount of pressure spread out from above. Then he shouted and smashed the hammer down harshly. Gale hammer. Violent winds blew instantly. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Bang! There was a dull sound. Chu Liyue immediately felt the ground under her feet shaking. A crack appeared instantly. The force on the hammer kept spreading to the surroundings. The crack also rapidly expanded. The ground was quickly filled with cracks like a spider web. Boom! The ground in front of everyone collapsed again. A huge pit appeared in front of everyone. Lei Laosi jumped down first. Chu Liyue followed closely behind. Chang Wanzhou and the rest wanted to follow immediately, but were stopped by Qin Yi's barrier. They turned around and saw that Qin Yi didn't seem to be in a hurry. He looked at Jiang Yuqing and the rest leisurely. Everyone please. Jiang Yuqing narrowed his eyes and didn't argue with him as he followed them. Elder Qiushi didn't dare to rush to the front or the back. When he saw that Jiang Yuqing and the rest had gone down, he then hurriedly chased after them. Mu Qinghe glanced at Qin Yi. I feel like I've seen this Qin Yi somewhere before. May I ask when you came to the Mystic Forest, young Master Qin? Qin Yi's eyes were open, and his lips curved up slightly. This is our private matter, so please forgive us for not being able to tell you. Also Vice Admiral Mu, eldest young Master Jiang, and the rest have all gone down. Aren't you going to follow them? Mu Qinghe suppressed her doubts, turned around, and jumped down as well. Qin Yi smiled, and then chased after them with Mu Hongyu and the rest. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 724. It was dark all around. The dark and cramped space was filled with a thick stench of decay and blood, and even the surrounding air seemed to have become sticky. Dumpling suddenly raised its wings. A red flame flew out instantly and streaked across the night sky like a shooting star, leaving behind a clear and bright line before finally disappearing into the abyss below. With the guidance of this flame, it was much more convenient for everyone to move forward. Lei Laosi, who was at the front, directly flew down. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. Everyone else also followed behind. Big brother Lei, have you guys been here before? Chu Luiyue asked softly as he descended. Lei Laosi nodded. Once, but that was a very long time ago. Back then, they had just arrived at the mystic forest and weren't very familiar with everything here, so they accidentally got into this trouble. Afterward, he relied on his big brother's help to get out of this godforsaken place. Since then, the two of them had basically been staying beside that mother tree to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Naturally, they didn't encounter such a thing again. Occasionally, someone would barge in from the outside, but they would be stopped at the periphery. Chu Luiyue and his group were the only ones who entered the depths of the mystic forest in the past year. I wonder if it's still the same as before, Lei Laosi mumbled. Chu Luiyue's heart moved, and he asked again. Oh right. Big brother Lei, I heard that the miasma in the mystic forest is actually white. Why is it that when we came here this time it was red? Also, it was mixed with a fishy and sweet blood stench, which made one very uncomfortable. Lei Laosi frowned. Speaking of this, actually Big Brother and I aren't too sure what's going on. When we first came, the miasma was indeed white. We didn't go out for a long time, and when we saw it again, it was already red. But the color was still rather light then, and it gradually became darker until it became like this now. He was also curious at the start, but his big brother kept telling him not to bother about it. Their only motive here was to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Lei Laosi had always been obedient to Qin Yan, and with his carefree personality, he really didn't ask further. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. According to Lei Laosi's words, it was highly possible that the mystic forest only started to change after they came here. And the time they came here, Chu Luiyue speculated that they must have come here after her accident. It was even possible that Dumpling was brought here by them. Thinking of this, Dumpling suddenly glanced at her and turned her head. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Dumpling means that it wasn't brought here by Qin Yi and the other two? Then where did it come from? Chu Luiyue asked Dumpling again in his mind. Dumpling, did you come here on your own? Dumpling shook her head again. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes, but when he looked at Dumpling, his eyes revealed a trace of confusion. In actual fact, even it didn't know what exactly happened to its body. Back then, Shengguan forcefully broke the contract with it before it lost its virginity. That was why it was able to survive. Originally, it wanted to perish together with Shengguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing to take revenge for her. In the end, before it could do anything, it fainted. When it woke up again, its physical body was already left in the mystic forest, and its soul was split into two. Half was left in its physical body, and the other half entered a third-grade blood ferret. It didn't know what it went through in the middle at all. Dumpling's thoughts were clearly transmitted to Chu Luiyue. She thought for a long time and didn't say anything. It seems like someone helped me, but I don't know who that person is. Perhaps I can get something out of Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. However, now isn't a good time. Quickly look. There seems to be someone down there. Lei Laosi suddenly shouted. Chu Luiyue immediately suppressed the many emotions in her heart and looked in the direction Lei Laosi was pointing at. Sure enough, in that dim space, there seemed to be a vague figure. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately increased her speed. However, when she gradually got closer, Chu Luiyue gradually knitted her brows. This person doesn't seem to be Shengguan Wan. Even if Shengguan Wan turned into ashes, I would still be able to recognize her. And this person down there, even though I can't see her face, that figure definitely isn't Shengguan Wan. However, Chu Luiyue only hesitated for a moment before she continued to rush down. Seeing that she actually overtook him, Lei Laosi hurriedly increased his speed and rushed over. What are those things down there? How can I let Her Highness rush to the front? However, Lei Laosi quickly realized, to his shock, that Chu Luiyue's speed wasn't any slower than his. In this space down there, all cultivators would be suppressed to a certain extent. However, Chu Luiyue doesn't seem to be. Perhaps it's because she contracted the red-tailed phoenix? Lei Laosi couldn't be bothered to ask more as he could only follow up at full speed. After a period of time, Chu Luiyue finally stopped. Lei Laosi arrived almost at the same time. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was about to walk toward that figure, he hurriedly said, "Wait. Hold on. It's dangerous." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "Don't worry. This person is already dead." Lei Laosi was taken aback as he walked closer. It was a young lady whose calves were stuck in the black mud, and most of her body was still outside. They saw the back view from above just now, so it was no wonder that they couldn't tell. It was just that her eyes were tightly shut, and she wasn't breathing at all. She was indeed dead. Chu Luiyue raised her hand and snapped her fingers. A ball of fire appeared in her palm, and instantly lit up the surroundings. And they finally saw that lady's face. Her face was purple, and her cheeks were deeply sunken in. Her facial features were distorted, and she looked like she experienced extreme torture before she died. However, there was only a wound on her chest, as if something directly pierced through it, and a large patch of blood stained the wound. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted slightly. Lei Laosi's expression also changed. How did this lady die so miserably and strangely? Who is this? The people at the back also followed one after another. Jiang Yuqing walked closer, and could already tell that the lady wasn't Sheng Guanwan. Chu Luiyue glanced at him. She's a disciple of the Nine-Star Alliance. In fact, this lady was the one who repeatedly mocked them previously. She was also the one who bullied Yi Ranran at Thousand View Garden back then. She was still arrogant and despotic when they saw her previously, but they didn't expect her to die in the blink of an eye. Jiang Yuqing walked to the two of them. When he saw that lady's face, his expression turned cold. Chu Luiyue had been paying attention to him, and when he saw his reaction, he raised his brows slightly. How strange. Seeing this scene, Jiang Yuqing's first reaction wasn't shock or doubt. Instead, it seemed like anger. Why does it seem like he's not surprised by this scene at all? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 725. This person isn't the third princess? Elder Qiushi also walked over with a shocked expression, and couldn't help but blurt out. Isn't this directly below the mother tree? The third princess clearly came down from here just now. Why isn't she here? Jiang Yuqing said coldly. This black swamp is flowing. So much time has passed. She might have gone somewhere else. Elder Qiushi slapped his head. I actually forgot about this. If that's the case, wouldn't it be even more difficult to find the third princess? No one responded to him. Elder Qiushi finally felt a hint of awkwardness. At this moment, Mu Qinghe and the others also caught up. Yi Ranran saw the woman's face and exclaimed, Isn't this the new disciple of the Nine-Star Alliance? She had the deepest impression of this woman in the entire Nine-Star Alliance. She didn't expect to meet her again in such a situation. Chu Luiyue nodded. That's her. How can it be? Didn't the Nine-Star Alliance people protect her? By the way, where are the other disciples of the Nine-Star Alliance? Yi Ranran muttered softly. He turned his head and looked around, but he didn't find any traces of anyone else. She seems to be the only one here. The other members of the Nine-Star Alliance aren't here. Chu Luiyue shook her head. After confirming the woman's identity, she had already checked the surroundings. There was no one else around. Mu Qinghe sized up the woman and said in a deep voice, She probably separated from the others. She probably got separated from the others and came here alone. Then she was strangled to death by the rolling leaf firs roots. Upon closer inspection, there were indeed signs of being tightly bound by something on her body. That one Yeshan is really scary. Yi Ranran had a lingering fear and a complicated expression on his face. Originally, he wanted to wait for a chance to find the Nine-Star Alliance to get revenge. But he didn't expect. Now, he had already guessed what had happened. Under those withered trees, perhaps they were all trapped people. If that was the case, It meant that the 1,000 people who came to the mystic forest were all in such a situation. Just like this woman, there were countless people who had died here without a sound. Thinking of this, it was really chilling. She wasn't strangled to death by the tree roots. A clear and calm voice suddenly sounded. Everyone fell silent. Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Luiyue. What did you say? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Her expression was nonchalant, but her gaze was very determined. If she was strangled to death by the tree roots, she shouldn't be like this. Mu Qinghe took 2 more steps forward, and with the help of the flame, he could finally see more clearly. A hint of shock flashed across his eyes. After a moment of silence, he finally nodded. My eyes were playing tricks on me. She really didn't die for this reason. He had seen what it was like to be entangled to death by a rolling leaf fir. And this woman, hers death was really too strange. What was even weirder was Chu Luiyue continued. The force in her body disappeared. Mu Qinghe pursed his lips. This was something he had just discovered. What do you mean? Mu Hongyu was comforting Yi Ranran, and couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue explained. After a normal cultivator dies, even if their life is gone, the force stored in their body won't dissipate immediately. Especially for this kind of talented person, there's definitely a lot of force in their flesh and bones. She should have died not long ago, but the force in her body is almost all gone. Chu Luiyue's words attracted everyone's attention. As expected, Lei Laoxi's realm was high, so he was naturally more sensitive to these things. The force in her body seems to have been sucked away by something. It's completely gone. Wait. Her core of essence seems to be damaged too. Lei Laoxi scanned the area with his force and had a horrified expression. Jiang Yuqing's eyelashes fluttered, and he lowered his eyes slightly. Chu Luiyue saw everything clearly from the side and sneered in his heart. It seemed that Jiang Yuqing was also very clear about what Sheng Guanwan was doing. If he remembered correctly, this woman had the Daijing Yuan meridian. It looks like something has devoured her power. Wan Yeshan is just a convenient tool, said Qini lightly. Everyone fell silent. Given the current situation, this was probably the only possibility. What is it? How could it be so cruel and terrifying? Yi Ranran was young and had never seen such a scene before. He was both frightened and angry. Elder Qiushi was worried. I didn't expect there to be such a terrifying thing in this place. We must find the 3rd princess as soon as possible. Otherwise, the corners of Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched ever so slightly. Elder Qiushi, don't worry. The 3rd princess is blessed by the heavens. Even if everyone else is in danger, she will definitely be safe and sound. Elder Qiushi choked, and felt that Chu Luiyue's words sounded weird. However, he didn't know how to refute, and could only fling his sleeves. Anyway, finding the 3rd princess is the most important thing. Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered with him. Sheng Guanwan probably doesn't want us to find her yet. Help! Help! A hoarse cry for help suddenly came from afar. Chu Luiyue found this voice very familiar, and looked in the direction of the voice. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes. It's senior brother Zhu Hong's voice. It's actually someone from Dragon Teeth Mountain? Mu Hongyu was very worried, and wanted to go over, but was stopped by Qin Yi. Once you leave this barrier, you'll be swallowed by this black swamp in less than 15 minutes. Mu Hongyu was shocked, and stopped in her tracks with an anxious expression. But that's senior brother Zhu Hong. He's not the only one. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke up. There seemed to be quite a few people in that dark shadow. She gave Mu Hongyu a reassuring look. Don't worry, I'll go take a look. After saying that, he flew in that direction. Perhaps it was because of the red-tailed phoenix, but she was obviously much more mobile than the others here. Mu Hongyu nodded and stared intently. Lei Laoxi hurriedly followed her. Help! Cough cough. Help! The closer they got, the clearer Zhu Hong's voice became. He struggled with difficulty in the black swamp, and even dragged a few unconscious people behind him. The surroundings were pitch black, and his body kept falling. The energy in his body also kept flowing away. His entire body seemed to be gradually turning cold. A deep sense of despair surged into his heart. Am I really going to die here? When I came, I said that I had to take good care of the sect's disciples. But now, Zhu Hong's voice gradually became softer as he laughed bitterly. Who can hear me if I cry for help in this place? I've already exhausted all my energy, and I really can't hold on anymore. Zhu Hong closed his eyes. Zhu Hong? A clear female voice suddenly rang out. Zhu Hong opened his eyes and tried his best to look forward. A silhouette was heading in this direction. The red light reflected her figure like a sharp blade that tore through the darkness, giving off a myriad of colors. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 726. For a moment, Zhu Hong thought that he was hallucinating. He closed his eyes and realized that the person didn't disappear. Instead, he was still coming over. And, I've seen this face before. Chu Luiyue. Zhu Hong mumbled in disbelief. Chu Luiyue was already in front of him. When he saw Zhu Hong's situation clearly, Chu Luiyue's expression froze. Half of his body had already sunk into the black swamp, and he was dragging 4 people behind him. From the looks of it, they seemed to have fainted, and it was all thanks to Zhu Hong tying them together with a rope that they were not separated from each other. However, Zhu Hong's face was pale, and he was barely breathing. He seemed to have exhausted all his energy and couldn't hold on any longer. Chu Luiyue immediately reached out his hand. Zhu Hong, give me your hand. Looking at the fair and tender hand in front of him, Zhu Hong finally realized that this was really Chu Luiyue. Zhu Hong reached out his hand in a daze. Lei Laosi hurriedly went forward, grabbed Zhu Hong's wrist, and lifted him up forcefully. How can I let His Highness do this? Lei Laosi was strong and had innate divine strength, so he easily dragged them out. Before Zhu Hong could react, he had already broken free from that terrifying swamp. Lei Laosi set up a barrier and surrounded the few of them. This way they wouldn't fall so easily again. Chu Luiyue smiled and glanced at Lei Laosi. Thank you for your help, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi's eyes twitched. I haven't seen His Highness for such a long time. When did he become so fond of joking? When he heard him calling him big brother, his legs really turned to jelly. Why, you're welcome. It's what I should do. Lei Laosi coughed and turned his head away. Chu Luiyue teased him as her lips curled up slightly. Then, she looked at Zhu Hong and the few people he brought along. They were indeed from Dragon Teeth Mountain. Chu Luiyue took out a bottle of pills and passed it to Zhu Hong. Replenish your energy first. Zhu Hong subconsciously raised his hand and received the elixir. He opened the cork, and a rich fragrance wafted out. Zhu Hong was shocked. The level of this pill was not low, and the ingredients used to refine it were extremely precious. It was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to obtain even one pill. But Chu Luiyue actually had an entire bottle. Moreover, she gave it to him so casually, which showed how generous she was. Zhu Hong was a little embarrassed, but when he thought of his current situation, he only hesitated for a moment before choosing to accept. The pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth. A gentle force spread from his chest to his limbs and bones. Very soon, Zhu Hong's complexion became much better. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated expression. I really don't know how to thank you. When I came here, I originally wanted to help Chu Luiyue and the others. Who would have thought that in the end, they would be the ones helping me? May I know who this is? He looked at Lei Laosi nervously. He was sure that this man was definitely not with them. However, his strength was extremely strong. Just by standing in front of it, one could feel the faint pressure. When did Chu Luiyue know such a powerful person? This is Big Brother Lei Laosi. We accidentally met him in the Mystic Forest, and he helped us a lot. She then looked at Lei Laosi. This is Zhu Hong. He's in charge of leading the team to Dragon Teeth Mountain this time. Lei Laosi sized Zhu Hong up. Zhu Hong instantly became nervous. You little brat, you're quite loyal. Lei Laosi chuckled. That's right. You're a man. He could tell that Zhu Hong could totally escape by himself if he wanted to. However, he still chose to bring these few people along. This persistence was really hard to come by. Zhu Hong heaved a sigh of relief and smiled bitterly. We're all from the same sect, so this is what I should do. It's just that I'm useless in the end. If I didn't meet you guys, I'm afraid. Then he returned the jade bottle to Chu Luyue. However, Chu Luyue shook her head. You can keep this for now. Let's go to another place and feed it to them. There seemed to be a warm current surging in Zhu Hong's heart. His lips moved, and in the end, he only said 2 words seriously. Thank you. Chu Luyue smiled. Let's go over there first. Hong Yu is very worried about you guys. Hong Yu is here too. Zhu Hong widened his eyes in shock. Chu Luyue nodded slightly, and was about to turn around. Piak! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Luyue's expression froze, and she looked up. A tree root that was as thick as an adult's waist suddenly swung over. It was very aggressive. It was extremely fast. Zhu Hong's expression changed. Run! This thing is dangerous. They were entangled by this thing just now, and that's why they ended up in such a state. Chu Luyue's gaze was cold as she swung her hand. A sharp dagger flew out. Zap! That tree root was actually split open from the middle by that dagger. The red juice instantly exploded. The bloody smell was so thick that it was almost suffocating. That tree root swung wildly, as if it wanted to get closer. Chu Luyue sneered. The next moment, 2 thin flying daggers suddenly flew out from the dagger. 2 consecutive sounds were heard. That tree root was actually cut off. Bam! 2 pieces of the tree root fell together. The swamp surged and quickly drowned it. Chu Luyue raised her hand. The dagger flew back. The 2 flying daggers that were as thin as cicadas' wings had also quickly returned. It was clean, and not a single mark was left on it. Chu Luyue looked at it with satisfaction, and put away the dagger. The entire process was smooth and smooth. Zhu Hong was dumbfounded. Just now, what did Chu Luyue do? She actually managed to get rid of the berserk tree root so easily. Chu Luyue took a deep look at that half of the tree root that had escaped and smiled. Let's go. At the same time, in another place, Shang Guanwan groaned, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Her expression was shocked and angry. Her face was flushed with blood, and her expression was distorted. The strange black rune between his eyebrows also began to shake along with it. Someone actually managed to block her attack so easily. Those people were all geniuses with the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Originally, they were already at her fingertips, but she didn't expect. Who is it? Shang Guanwan gritted her teeth. Although her detection range was very wide, and almost covered the entire mystic forest, there was one very important point. She could only sense the existence of those who were bound by Wan Yeshan. As for the others, she couldn't know. Therefore, she couldn't guess who did it. However, there were a few people who were not in this range from the very beginning. Chu Luyue and the group. Shang Guanwan couldn't help but suspect Chu Luyue. But she was a little uncertain, because she didn't think that Chu Luyue had such strength. Could it be there were other powerful existences here that she didn't know? Shang Guanwan was puzzled. However, she only struggled for a while and temporarily put this matter aside. If this group of people couldn't do it, then it would be fine to change people. The Yuan Meridian in her body had already recovered by a quarter. It wouldn't be long before it was completely healed. A faint green light flashed through Shang Guanwan's eyes. Digression. 6 o'clock. Torturing scum is very fast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.